Hey everyone, tonight we journey into the forgotten chronicles of the galaxy's first great war. A conflict so devastating, so profound in its consequences, that its echoes still ripple through the Force 5,000 years later. This is the story of the Great Hyperspace War, where ancient Sith Lords clashed with the first Jedi Knights in a battle that would shape the destiny of countless worlds. From the crimson sands of Corrigan, where dark rituals once summoned fleets across impossible distances, to the gleaming spires of Coruscant, where Jedi Masters first felt the approaching shadow. Their tale is one of power, betrayal, and the eternal struggle between light and darkness that defines the very fabric of the galaxy. So before we begin this epic journey through time, take a moment to like this video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy these deep dives into galactic history. And let me know in the comments where you're listening from and what time it is for you. It's always incredible to see fellow Star Wars enthusiasts joining us from across the world. Now dim the lights, settle into your most comfortable position, and let's travel back through the mists of time together. 5 millennia ago, in the depths of a forgotten Jedi archive, buried beneath Coruscant's ancient foundations, a discovery was made that should have remained lost forever. A single holocron, its crystalline surface scarred by unimaginable age, containing star charts that defied everything the Republic knew about hyperspace navigation, routes that twisted through dimensions where the Force itself seemed to scream in agony, coordinates leading to worlds that existed in the space between spaces, where reality bent to the will of beings who had transcended the boundaries between life and death. The Jedi archivist who found it, a scholar whose name has been deliberately erased from all records, made the fatal mistake of activating the ancient device. In that moment, as crimson light spilled across the chamber walls, she witnessed a vision that would haunt her final days. Massive wedge-shaped vessels emerging from hyperspace like predators from the void, their hulls adorned with symbols that seemed to writhe and pulse with malevolent life. Beings in flowing robes whose faces bore the marks of a species she had never encountered, yet whose connection to the dark side was so powerful it made the very stars tremble. But the vision showed her something else. Something that made her blood freeze in her veins. These weren't invaders from some distant galaxy. These were Jedi, or rather what Jedi could become when they abandoned everything the Order stood for. Dark Jedi who had found something in the unknown regions, something that had transformed them into lords of a crimson empire built on conquest and domination. And in the center of it all, a figure whose very presence seemed to bend space and time around him. Naga Sadow, the Sith Lord whose ambitions would ignite a war that would consume 1,000 worlds and forever change the meaning of what it meant to wield the Force. The archivist's final log entry contained only 7 words before her signal went dark forever. The coordinates are real, they are coming. In the heart of Coruscant, where the endless cityscape stretches beyond the horizon in every direction, the Jedi Temple stands as a beacon of ancient wisdom. But beneath its gleaming spires and meditation halls, in chambers carved from the living rock of the planet's forgotten surface, lie the archives that hold the galaxy's most dangerous secrets. Here, in the deepest levels where even the temple's own guardians rarely venture, the air itself seems heavy with the weight of accumulated knowledge. Crystalline holocrons float in perfect suspension, their surfaces humming with stored memories that span millennia. The walls are lined with databanks containing the testimonies of 10,000 Jedi, their voices preserved in shimmering blue light, waiting to share their wisdom with those who seek understanding. This is where we find our guide, through the mysteries of the past. Jedi Master Kira Thane, Chief Archivist of the Temple's Historical Division, a woman whose entire life has been dedicated to preserving the memories of those who came before. Her connection to the Force runs deep, not through combat or politics, but through the gentle art of listening to the echoes of history that resonate within ancient artifacts. Master Thane moves through the archives with the quiet grace of someone who has spent decades among the whispers of the past. Her robes, simple and unadorned, rustle softly against the polished stone floor as she makes her way toward the section that has consumed her thoughts for weeks. The restricted collection, where only the most senior archivists are permitted to tread. The chamber she enters is unlike any other in the temple. Here, the walls themselves seem to pulse with a subtle darkness, lined with containment fields that hold artifacts too dangerous for normal storage. Sith holocrons, their angular surfaces gleaming like drops of crystallized blood. Ancient weapons whose very metal has been corrupted by exposure to the dark side. And in the center of it all, the discovery that has changed everything. The holocron is smaller than most, no larger than a human fist, but its presence fills the entire chamber with an almost tangible sense of unease. Its surface is scarred and pitted, bearing the marks of incredible age, yet within its crystalline heart, crimson light swirls like a trapped storm. This is the artifact that claimed the life of the previous archivist, the one whose final transmission spoke of coordinates and an approaching darkness. Beside Master Thane stands her most trusted colleague, Jedi Master Jorin Kais, keeper of the temple's most sensitive records. Where Thane is contemplative and scholarly, Kais carries himself with the bearing of a warrior who has seen too much of the galaxy's darkness. His weathered features speak of campaigns fought in the service of peace, but his eyes hold the wisdom of someone who understands that sometimes the greatest battles are fought not with lightsabers, but with knowledge. Master Kais gestures toward the sealed containment field that surrounds the ancient holocron. His voice carries the weight of years spent studying the galaxy's darkest chapters. The previous archivist, he explains, had been investigating reports of strange hyperspace anomalies, disturbances in the Force that seemed to follow routes that shouldn't exist according to any known star charts. She had been brilliant, perhaps too brilliant for her own good. Her research had led her to obscure references scattered throughout the archives, fragments of testimony from Jedi who had lived through events that were deliberately forgotten. References to a time when the Republic was young and naive, when contact with unknown civilizations beyond the galactic rim brought not trade and diplomacy, but war and devastation. The holocron had been discovered in a sealed chamber that had been walled up for over 4,000 years. The previous archivist had spent months deciphering the access codes, driven by an obsession that her colleagues had begun to find troubling. Her final research notes speak of visions that came to her through the Force, glimpses of massive fleets emerging from hyperspace routes that cut through dimensions where normal ships could not survive. And then came her final transmission, those 7 words that have haunted the archives ever since. The coordinates are real. They are coming. Before anyone could respond, her life signs had vanished. Her body found collapsed beside the activated holocron, her face frozen in an expression of absolute terror. Now Master Thane stands before the same artifact, knowing that to activate it might mean sharing her predecessor's fate, yet understanding that the knowledge it contains may be the only way to understand the true scope of the approaching darkness that the Force itself seems to be warning them about. Master Thane extends her hand toward the containment field, feeling the dark energy pulsing from within the ancient holocron like a heartbeat made of shadow. The Force whispers warnings around her, yet beneath those warnings lies something else. A pull, as if the artifact itself is calling to her across the centuries, demanding that its secrets finally be revealed. With careful precision, she deactivates the containment field. The moment the energy barrier dissipates, the temperature in the chamber drops noticeably, and both Jedi feel the oppressive weight of the dark side pressing against their consciousness like a living thing. Master Case takes a step closer, his hand instinctively moving toward his lightsaber, though he knows no weapon can protect against the kind of danger they now face. The holocron responds to Master Thane's touch with reluctant cooperation, its crystalline surface warming under her fingers as ancient circuits flicker to life. The crimson light within grows brighter, casting dancing shadows across the chamber walls, and suddenly the air fills with the sound of a voice that has been silent for 5 millennia. The holographic projection that materializes above the device is unlike anything either Jedi has ever encountered. The figure appears to be human, yet there is something fundamentally wrong about his features. His skin bears intricate tattoos that seem to move and shift in the crimson light, and his eyes hold a depth of malevolence that makes even seasoned Jedi Masters feel a chill of recognition. This is what a Jedi looks like when they have gazed too long into the abyss and allowed it to gaze back. The figure identifies himself as Dathka Graish, once a Jedi Knight of the Republic, now something far more terrible. His testimony speaks of events that occurred during the earliest days of galactic exploration, when Republic scouts first ventured beyond the known hyperlanes into regions that had been deliberately marked as forbidden. He speaks of a journey that was meant to be one of discovery and enlightenment, but became instead a descent into nightmare. Graish's expedition had followed hyperspace routes that defied conventional navigation, paths that seemed to twist through dimensions where the normal rules of physics held no meaning. Their destination was a cluster of worlds in the unknown regions, planets that appeared on no official charts, but whose existence had been hinted at in fragmentary records recovered from pre-Republic civilizations. What they found there changed everything they thought they knew about the nature of the Force itself. A species that called themselves the Sith, beings who had evolved not alongside the light side of the Force, but in harmony with its darker aspects. These were not fallen Jedi or corrupted Force users, but an entire civilization that had learned to channel emotions like anger, passion, and ambition into a form of power that rivaled anything the Jedi had ever imagined. The Sith homeworld of Korriban was a planet where the very ground pulsed with dark side energy, where massive tombs and temples had been carved from living rock over the course of millennia. The Sith themselves were a proud and ancient people, ruled by a caste of Force users who wielded power through rituals and ceremonies that would have horrified the Jedi Council. Yet there was something magnificent about their civilization, a grandeur and nobility that spoke to depths of the Force that the Republic had never explored. Graish's voice takes on a note of terrible longing as he describes his first encounter with Sith philosophy. Where the Jedi taught restraint and self-denial, the Sith embraced the full spectrum of emotion as a pathway to understanding. Where the Jedi sought to serve others, the Sith believed that true service came from the pursuit of personal excellence and the strength to shape reality according to one's will. The seduction was gradual but inexorable. Graish and his fellow explorers were welcomed as honored guests, invited to study in the great libraries of Korriban, to observe rituals that had been performed since before the Republic existed. The Sith Lord spoke of power not as corruption but as evolution, the natural progression of beings who refused to limit themselves to half of what the Force offered. Master Thane feels a disturbing resonance as she listens to Graish's words, understanding for the first time how seemingly reasonable beings could be led down such a dark path. The Sith did not present themselves as evil, but as enlightened, as beings who had transcended the artificial limitations that bound lesser species. Their arguments were compelling, their demonstrations of power undeniable, and their culture possessed a sophistication that rivaled anything in the Republic. The transformation of the Jedi expedition was not sudden but methodical. One by one, Graish's companions began to adopt Sith practices, justifying each compromise as necessary for their research, each small betrayal of Jedi principles as a temporary expedient. They learned to channel their emotions, to draw strength from passion rather than serenity, to see conflict not as something to be avoided, but as a tool for growth and understanding. By the time they realized what they had become, it was far too late to turn back. The Sith had not corrupted them through force or deception, but through the simple expedient of showing them what they could become if they were willing to embrace their full potential. They had been welcomed as students and emerged as converts, no longer Jedi Knights but Dark Lords of the Sith. Grasha's holographic form flickers as he reaches the climax of his testimony, his voice dropping to a whisper that somehow fills the entire chamber. The true horror, he explains, was not in what they had become, but in how right it felt. The power that flowed through them was intoxicating, the sense of purpose and clarity, unlike anything they had experienced as Jedi. They had found their true calling not in service to the light, but in mastery of the darkness. The star charts contained within the holocron are not merely navigational aids, but something far more dangerous. They represent pathways through hyperspace that had been mapped by Sith navigators over thousands of years, routes that connected the unknown regions to the heart of Republic space. More than that, they contained the ritual formulas that would allow Sith fleets to traverse these impossible distances, to emerge from hyperspace with a coordination and precision that would make conventional military defense useless. Master Case interrupts the playback, his voice tight with concern. The implications of what they are hearing go far beyond historical curiosity. If these routes truly exist, if Sith Lords have maintained the knowledge of how to use them, then the Republic faces a threat unlike anything in its history. Enemy fleets could appear without warning at any point in known space, striking at worlds that had never known the meaning of war. But Grasha's testimony contains an even more disturbing revelation. The Sith Empire had not remained static during the millennia since his expedition. Under the guidance of beings who had transcended the normal limitations of mortality, it had grown and evolved, spreading across hundreds of worlds in the unknown regions. The Sith had learned from their contact with the Republic expedition, adapting Republic technology to their own needs while maintaining the dark side traditions that were the source of their power. The holocron projects images as Gracie's voice continues, showing massive temple complexes on worlds whose names appear in no Republic database. Sith academies, where young beings are trained in the arts of war and governance through the lens of dark side philosophy. Fleets of ships that combine Republic engineering with Sith alchemy. Vessels capable of feats that would be impossible using conventional technology alone. At the center of it all stands a figure whose very presence seems to warp the holographic projection around him. Naga Sado, a Sith Lord whose ambitions extend far beyond the mere conquest of territory. Sado envisions a galaxy where the artificial divisions between light and dark are swept away, where beings are free to explore the full spectrum of what the Force offers without the limitations imposed by Jedi philosophy. The final images show something that makes both Jedi Masters step back in alarm. Massive construction projects on the edge of Sith space, shipyards and training facilities, on a scale that dwarfs anything in the Republic. This is not the preparation for raids or exploration, but for total war, a conflict that would determine whether the galaxy's future would be guided by Jedi restraint or Sith ambition. As the holocron's message reaches its end, Grouch delivers a final warning that chills both listeners to their core. The coordinates contained within this device are more than historical curiosities. They are an invasion route, a pathway that Sith fleets will follow when the time comes to reclaim what they see as their rightful place in galactic civilization. The only question is not whether they will come, but when. The decision to follow the ancient star charts was not made lightly. For 3 days, Master Thane and Master Casey deliberated with the Jedi Council, sharing Grass's testimony and debating the wisdom of venturing into unknown regions that had already claimed one expedition. The council chambers echoed with arguments both for and against the mission, voices raised in concern for the safety of the galaxy and the souls of those who would undertake such a perilous journey. In the end, it was Master Yoda himself who cast the deciding vote, his ancient wisdom recognizing that some knowledge, no matter how dangerous, cannot be left unexplored. The Force itself seemed to be guiding them toward this confrontation with the past, and to ignore such guidance would be to abandon their duty as guardians of peace and justice. A small research vessel was prepared, its crew consisting of volunteers who understood they might not return from the depths of space they were about to explore. The ship that carries them beyond the edge of known space is called the Seeker of Truth, a fitting name for a vessel embarking on a mission to uncover secrets that have been buried for millennia. Its hull gleams silver against the star field as it departs from Coruscant, carrying not just its crew, but the hopes and fears of the entire Jedi Order. The hyperdrive engines hum with a deeper resonance than usual, modified to handle the unique demands of navigating routes that exist partially outside normal space-time. Master Thane stands in the ship's observation lounge, watching familiar constellations fade into unfamiliar configurations as they travel deeper into regions that appear on no Republic charts. The stars themselves seem different here, their light carrying subtle variations in color and intensity that speak of cosmic forces unknown to conventional astronomy. Through the Force, she can feel something calling to her from the darkness ahead, a presence that is both ancient and terrible, yet strangely compelling. The hyperspace jump that takes them to the coordinates specified in Greisch's star charts is unlike anything any of them have experienced. Normal hyperspace travel involves a smooth transition into the swirling blue tunnel of accelerated motion, but these ancient routes follow pathways that seem to twist through dimensions where the fundamental nature of reality operates under different rules. The ship shudders as it navigates currents of dark-side energy that flow through hyperspace like cosmic rivers, streams of power that have been channeled and directed by Sith navigators for thousands of years. When they finally emerge from hyperspace, the sight that greets them defies every expectation. Korriban hangs before them like a crimson jewel against the black of space, its surface painted in shades of red and orange that speak of a world where the very ground has been saturated with the power of the dark side. Two small moons orbit the planet, their surfaces scarred by what appear to be massive excavation projects, creating a system that pulses with malevolent energy. The planet's atmosphere swirls with dust storms that follow patterns too regular to be natural, forming spirals and geometric shapes that suggest the influence of conscious will rather than random weather. Even from orbit, the crew can see the massive structures that dot the planet's surface, pyramids and temples that dwarf anything in Republic space, monuments to a civilization that has had millennia to perfect the art of channeling dark side power into architectural form. As the Seeker of Truth enters Korriban's atmosphere, the ship's instruments begin registering energy readings that should be impossible. The planet's magnetic field has been artificially altered, shaped into patterns that amplify force sensitivity and channel emotional energy toward specific locations on the surface. This is not merely a world where Force users happen to live, but a planet that has been transformed into a massive focus, a tool for amplifying and directing power on a scale that makes individual Sith Lords into forces of nature. The landing site they choose is in the Valley of the Dark Lords, a vast canyon filled with tombs and temples that stretch beyond the horizon in every direction. The architecture is breathtaking in its alien grandeur, combining elements that seem both familiar and utterly foreign to Republic sensibilities. Massive statues of Sith Lords from ages past line the valley walls, their features carved with such skill that they seem ready to step down from their pedestals and resume their ancient reign. The moment Master Thane steps onto Korriban's surface, she feels the full weight of the planet's dark side presence pressing against her consciousness. This is not the subtle corruption that comes from exposure to individual dark side artifacts, but the accumulated power of an entire civilization that has spent millennia perfecting the art of channeling negative emotions into constructive purpose. The very air seems to whisper with the voices of ancient Sith Lords, their wisdom and their madness preserved in the planet's crystalline core. Master Case leads the archaeological team toward the largest of the nearby structures, a temple complex that appears to have been carved from a single massive piece of red stone. The walls are covered with hieroglyphs that seem to shift and change when viewed directly, a writing system that incorporates force impressions along with visual symbols. Reading these inscriptions requires not just linguistic knowledge but the ability to interpret emotional resonances that have been embedded in the stone itself. The interior of the temple reveals chambers that defy conventional understanding of architecture and physics. Rooms that appear small from the outside contain vast spaces within, their dimensions expanded through applications of Sith alchemy that bend the fundamental nature of space. Corridors that should lead in straight lines curve back upon themselves, creating paths that can only be navigated by those who understand the philosophical principles underlying their construction. In the deepest chamber of the temple, the team discovers something that makes even seasoned Jedi masters pause in wonder and concern. A collection of holocrons, unlike anything in the Jedi archives, devices that combine crystalline technology with organic components in ways that create artificial intelligences capable of independent thought and decision-making. These are not mere recording devices but preserved consciousnesses, the actual personalities of Sith Lords who chose to bind their souls to these crystalline matrices rather than face the limitations of mortal death. The holocrons activate at their approach, projecting holographic forms that regard the Jedi visitors with expressions ranging from curiosity to barely concealed hostility. These are beings who remember the time before the Republic existed, who witnessed the rise and fall of civilizations that have been forgotten by galactic history. Their knowledge spans millennia, encompassing secrets of the Force that would revolutionize understanding of its nature and potential applications. One holocron in particular draws Master Thane's attention, its surface decorated with symbols that match those she has seen in Grice's star charts. The Sith Lord it contains introduces himself as Tulak Hord, a being who claims to have been present during the first contacts between Sith and Republic forces. His testimony speaks of events that occurred generations before the current crisis, laying the groundwork for the conflict that now threatens to engulf the galaxy. Hord's account reveals the true scope of Sith preparations for their return to galactic prominence. For centuries, Sith infiltrators have been moving through Republic space, gathering intelligence about military capabilities, political structures, and the current state of Jedi training. They have studied Republic weaknesses with the same methodical precision that Jedi scholars apply to understanding the Force, creating detailed plans for conquest that take advantage of every vulnerability they have discovered. The energy readings that first drew them to this chamber now reveal their source. Hidden beneath the temple floors lies a network of crystalline conduits that channel dark side energy from across the planet's surface, concentrating it into a focal point that can project power across interstellar distances. This is how Sith Lords coordinate their activities across multiple star systems, maintaining communication and control through means that Republic technology cannot detect or intercept. As the team explores deeper into the temple complex, they begin to understand that Korriban is not merely the Sith homeworld, but the center of an empire that spans hundreds of worlds throughout the unknown regions. Each tomb and temple serves as both monument and communication relay, part of a vast network that allows Sith Lords to project their influence across distances that would challenge even the most advanced Republic technology. The final chamber they explore contains something that chills them to the bone. A holographic star map showing the current disposition of Sith fleets throughout the unknown regions, vessels that have been gathering at staging points along the ancient hyperspace routes for months. The scale of the military buildup is staggering, representing a coordinated effort that dwarfs anything in Republic military history. At the center of the display stands a single figure whose presence seems to dominate the entire projection. Naga Sadow, Dark Lord of the Sith, reviewing fleet positions and invasion timetables with the calm precision of a being who has spent decades preparing for this moment. The hologram is not a recording but a live transmission, showing events that are occurring at this very moment somewhere in the depths of Sith space. As they watch in fascination and horror, Sado turns toward the projection device, as if sensing their observation across the vast distances of space. The holographic projection shifts and expands, revealing not just Sado but the War Council chamber where he stands. Massive columns of black stone rise toward a vaulted ceiling, decorated with constellations that map the unknown regions in precise detail. Around a circular table sit figures whose very presence radiates authority and menace, Sith Lords whose names have become legend, even in the depths of space where legends are born and die unrecorded. Master Ka steps forward, his hand moving instinctively toward his lightsaber, though he knows the gesture is meaningless against a holographic projection. The tactical display shows fleet movements on a scale that defies comprehension. Hundreds of vessels moving in coordinated patterns across dozens of star systems. This is not the random raiding that Republic intelligence has attributed to unknown regions' pirates, but a military operation planned with the precision that only comes from centuries of preparation and unlimited resources. The Sith Lord, whose holocron contains Tulak Horde's consciousness, begins to speak, his voice carrying the weight of authority earned through millennia of study and conquest. He explains what the Jedi are witnessing, translating the tactical displays into terms that Republic minds can comprehend. Each symbol represents not just a ship, but a weapon of war enhanced through Sith alchemy, vessels capable of feats that conventional military doctrine considers impossible. The Sith Empire that emerges from Horde's explanation is nothing like what Republic intelligence has imagined. This is not a collection of primitive worlds ruled by dark side cultists, but a sophisticated civilization that has spent the last 1,000 years perfecting the integration of technology and mysticism. Horde's projection gestures toward the tactical display, highlighting key worlds that serve as staging points for the coming invasion. Each location has been chosen not just for strategic value, but for its connection to the cosmic currents that flow through the Force. The Sith have learned to navigate hyperspace using routes that follow these natural energy flows, allowing their fleets to travel faster and with greater precision than anything Republic technology can achieve. Master Thane realizes with growing horror that what they are witnessing is not intelligence gathering, but the final coordination meeting before the invasion begins. The casual confidence with which the Sith Lords discuss their plans suggests they view the coming conflict not as a war, but as an inevitable correction of galactic balance. In their minds, the Republic represents an aberration, a temporary disruption of the natural order that must be restored through the application of superior will and power. The chamber around them begins to resonate with dark side energy as more holocrons activate in response to their presence. Ancient Sith Lords whose names have been lost to history emerge from crystalline prisons, their consciousness preserved across millennia by techniques that the Jedi Order has never imagined. Each projection adds details to the emerging picture of Sith civilization, revealing layers of complexity that challenge every assumption about the nature of the dark side. These are not the mindless monsters of Jedi propaganda, but sophisticated beings who have chosen to embrace aspects of the Force that the Republic considers forbidden. Their philosophy is internally consistent, their culture possesses genuine nobility, and their achievements in art, science, and mysticism rival anything the Republic has produced. The disturbing truth is that they may not be wrong about the limitations of Jedi teaching or the artificial nature of the barriers that Republic society has erected against the full exploration of Force potential. Tulak Horde's projection turns toward Master Thane, his ancient eyes holding depths of knowledge that span geological ages. He speaks of the original Sith species, beings who evolved in harmony with the dark side of the Force over millions of years. Their civilization was built on principles that seem paradoxical to Republic thinking, achieving order through controlled chaos, unity through the celebration of individual excellence, and peace through the acknowledgement that conflict is the engine of growth and evolution. The arrival of the Dark Jedi exiles changed everything. But not in the way that Republic history suggests. Rather than conquering the Sith through superior power, The exiles were absorbed into Sith culture, their human perspectives and Republic knowledge blending with Sith wisdom to create something unprecedented in galactic history. The hybrid civilization that emerged combined the best aspects of both traditions while transcending the limitations that had constrained each separately. Naga Sadow represents the culmination of this fusion, a being who embodies both the passionate intensity of Sith philosophy and the strategic brilliance of the greatest Jedi tacticians. His rise to power was not achieved through brute force, but through the careful cultivation of alliances and the patient accumulation of knowledge. He understands both the Republic and the Sith Empire better than anyone else alive, making him uniquely qualified to orchestrate their eventual integration. The holographic display shifts again, showing detailed schematics of Republic worlds that the Sith have been studying for generations. Coruscant appears in perfect detail, every district and building mapped with precision that suggests the work of countless infiltrators operating over decades. The Jedi Temple itself is shown in cross-section, its hidden chambers and defensive systems laid bare for Sith strategic planning. Master Case feels a chill of recognition as he realizes that Sith intelligence networks have penetrated every level of Republic society. The casual accuracy with which their displays show classified information suggests that the coming invasion will face no surprises, no unknown defensive capabilities that might disrupt their carefully laid plans. The Republic will be fighting an enemy that knows its every strength and weakness while remaining essentially mysterious itself. The final revelation comes from the oldest holocron in the chamber, a device that contains the consciousness of a Sith Lord whose name has been deliberately erased from all records. This being speaks of the ultimate purpose behind the invasion, goals that transcend mere territorial conquest or political domination. The Sith seek nothing less than the transformation of galactic civilization itself, the creation of a new order where beings are free to explore the full spectrum of their potential without artificial limitations. In their vision, the galaxy would be ruled not by the weak consensus of democratic institutions, but by the enlightened guidance of those who have mastered both light and dark aspects of the Force. Conflict would not be eliminated, but channeled into constructive purposes, driving innovation and growth rather than senseless destruction. The result would be a civilization that could expand beyond the galaxy itself, spreading consciousness and power throughout the universe. The seductive nature of this vision is perhaps the most disturbing aspect of what they are witnessing. The Sith do not present themselves as conquerors, but as liberators, beings who seek to free the galaxy from self-imposed limitations and guide it toward a destiny that neither Jedi nor Republic politicians have the wisdom to imagine. Their arguments are compelling, their achievements undeniable, and their confidence absolute. As the holographic briefing continues, it becomes clear that the invasion forces are already in motion. Sith fleets have been departing from staging areas throughout the unknown regions, following hyperspace routes that will bring them to the heart of Republic space within days. The carefully coordinated timing ensures that multiple worlds will face simultaneous attacks, overwhelming Republic defenses through sheer scope rather than superior numbers. The chamber begins to dim as the ancient holocrons prepare to return to their dormant state, but not before delivering a final message that will haunt both Jedi Masters for the rest of their lives. The invasion is not meant to destroy the Republic, but to transform it, to demonstrate the superiority of Sith philosophy through the practical application of unlimited power, guided by unlimited ambition. Those who survive the coming war will emerge as citizens of a new galactic order, one where the artificial divisions between light and dark have been swept away in favor of a more perfect understanding of what sentient beings can achieve when they embrace their full potential. The last image they see before the projections fade is Naga Sadow himself, standing at the bridge of a massive warship whose hull gleams with the distinctive red and black patterns of Sith military design. His expression is one of calm satisfaction, the look of a being who has spent his entire existence preparing for this moment and now sees his life's work about to reach fruition. In the deepest chambers of the temple complex, Master Thane discovers archives that predate even the oldest Republic records, crystalline storage devices that contain the actual memories of beings who witnessed the birth of the Sith Empire. These are not second-hand accounts or interpreted histories, but direct neural recordings, the preserved experiences of individuals who lived through events that shaped the galaxy's destiny. The technology itself represents achievements in consciousness preservation that the Republic has never imagined possible. The first memory crystal she activates reveals the story that Republic historians have spent centuries trying to piece together from fragments and speculation. The 100-Year Darkness, that legendary conflict between Orthodox Jedi and those who sought to explore forbidden aspects of the Force, was not the simple morality tale that has been passed down through generations of teaching. It was a philosophical war that divided the Jedi Order at its very foundation, challenging assumptions about the nature of power and the responsibilities of those who wield it. Through the preserved memories, she witnesses the debates that raged in the halls of the ancient Jedi Temple, arguments between masters whose wisdom was matched only by the depth of their disagreement. On one side stood those who believed that the Force was inherently balanced between light and dark, and that true understanding required the exploration of both aspects. On the other side were those who insisted that the dark side was a corruption, a pathway to destruction that must be avoided at all costs. The Dark Jedi, who would eventually become the founders of the Sith Empire, were not the power-hungry monsters of later propaganda, but sincere seekers of truth who believed that the Jedi Order's restrictions were artificial limitations that prevented genuine understanding of the Force's full potential. Their experiments with emotion, passion, and individual will were not motivated by malice, but by a genuine desire to unlock capabilities that Orthodox teaching insisted were too dangerous to explore. The memory crystals show her the moment when dialogue became impossible, when philosophical differences hardened into irreconcilable positions that could only be resolved through conflict. The Orthodox Jedi, convinced that their former colleagues had been corrupted beyond redemption, declared them heretics and enemies of everything the Order represented. The Dark Jedi, equally convinced that orthodoxy had become a prison that constrained the natural evolution of Force understanding, accepted the designation with pride rather than shame. The war that followed was unlike anything the galaxy had ever witnessed. A conflict fought not just with lightsabers and military tactics, but with competing visions of what sentient beings could become if they were freed from self-imposed limitations. Both sides demonstrated capabilities that pushed the boundaries of what was considered possible, creating techniques and technologies that would influence galactic development for millennia to come. Master Case joins her as the memory crystals reveal the final stages of the conflict, when it became clear that neither side could achieve total victory without destroying the very civilization they sought to protect or transform. The Orthodox Jedi possessed superior numbers and the support of established institutions, but the Dark Jedi had unlocked powers that made individual combat effectiveness irrelevant to traditional military calculations. The resolution came not through decisive battle, but through exhaustion and the recognition that continued conflict would consume everything both sides claimed to value. The Dark Jedi agreed to exile rather than face extermination, accepting banishment to the unknown regions rather than submit to orthodox restrictions on their research and development. It was presented as a victory for orthodoxy, but the memory crystals reveal it as a compromise that neither side truly wanted. The journey into the unknown regions transformed the exiles in ways that none of them had anticipated. Cut off from the familiar structures of Republic civilization, they were forced to develop new approaches to survival and organization that drew heavily on their expanded understanding of Force capabilities. The ships that carried them beyond the galactic rim were not just vessels of transportation, but mobile laboratories where they continued their research into the nature of power and consciousness. What they found in the depths of unexplored space changed everything they thought they knew about the Force itself. The Sith homeworld of Korriban was inhabited by a species that had evolved in harmony with dark side energies over millions of years, beings whose entire civilization was built around the cultivation and application of emotions like passion, ambition, and the will to power. These were not corrupted Force users, but an entirely different approach to consciousness and reality manipulation. The first contact between the Dark Jedi exiles and the Sith species was a moment of mutual recognition that transcended species boundaries and cultural differences. Both groups had been seeking something that their original societies could not provide, and in each other they found not enemies but kindred spirits who shared a vision of what Force users could become if they were freed from artificial constraints. The memory crystals reveal the gradual integration of the two traditions, a process that took generations to complete but ultimately produced something unprecedented in galactic history. The Dark Jedi brought Republic technology, strategic thinking, and a systematic approach to Force development that the Sith had never encountered. The Sith contributed millennia of practical experience with dark side applications, cultural traditions that celebrated individual excellence, and techniques for consciousness preservation that made death merely a temporary inconvenience. Master Thane pauses the playback as she realizes that what she is witnessing is not the corruption of fallen Jedi, but the birth of a genuinely new form of civilization. The hybrid culture that emerged from this fusion possessed capabilities that neither parent tradition could have achieved alone, combining the best aspects of both while transcending the limitations that had constrained each separately. The Sith Lords who emerged from this synthesis were not the mindless servants of darkness that Republic propaganda described, but sophisticated beings who had learned to channel the full spectrum of the Force toward constructive purposes. Their society was built on principles that seemed paradoxical to Republic thinking, but produced results that could not be denied. Competition drove innovation, passion fueled achievement, and the celebration of individual will created a collective strength that surpassed anything based on selfless service alone. The memory crystals show the gradual expansion of Sith influence throughout the unknown regions, a process of exploration and colonization that followed principles very different from Republic expansion. Rather than imposing a single model of civilization on diverse worlds, the Sith adapted their approach to local conditions while maintaining core philosophical principles that could accommodate almost any form of cultural expression. Each world that joined the Sith Empire contributed its own unique perspectives and capabilities to the growing whole, creating a diversity of approaches to Force development that would have been impossible under the standardized training methods of the Jedi Order. The result was an empire that grew stronger through internal diversity rather than weaker, a civilization that embraced contradiction and paradox as sources of creative tension rather than problems to be resolved. As the archived memories progress through centuries of Sith development, a disturbing pattern begins to emerge. The Empire has not remained static during its isolation from Republic space, but has continued to evolve and grow, developing capabilities that dwarf anything the Republic has achieved. Their technology integrates organic and crystalline components in ways that blur the distinction between living beings and mechanical devices, creating tools that respond to thought and emotion rather than crude physical manipulation. Their military doctrine reflects this integration of mysticism and technology, producing fleets that operate more like extensions of their commander's will than collections of separate vessels. The coordination displayed in their current invasion preparations is not achieved through conventional communication systems, but through Force connections that allow individual ships to respond to tactical changes with the reflexes of a single organism. The final memory crystal contains something that makes both Jedi Masters step back in alarm. It shows the current state of Sith society, a civilization that has spent the last 1,000 years preparing not just for invasion, but for the complete transformation of galactic culture. Their academies train not just warriors and rulers, but philosophers, artists, and scientists who approach their disciplines through the lens of unlimited possibility rather than cautious restraint. The beings they have become represent the ultimate expression of what the original Dark Jedi exiles were seeking when they first challenged orthodox restrictions on Force development. They have transcended the limitations of single-species consciousness, incorporating perspectives and capabilities from dozens of different civilizations into a synthetic whole that possesses capabilities beyond anything the Republic has imagined. Naga Sato himself appears in the final recordings, but not as the distant figure they witnessed in the tactical briefings. Here he is shown in his private chambers, surrounded by artifacts and technologies that represent the accumulated wisdom of an entire galactic civilization. His expression is one of profound sadness rather than triumphant ambition, the look of a being who understands that the coming conflict is not a victory to be celebrated, but a tragedy that could have been avoided if the galaxy had been willing to embrace a broader understanding of what consciousness and power could achieve together. The recording ends with Sato speaking directly to the memory crystal, as if he knew that someday Republic representatives would discover these archives and witness this testimony. His words are not a threat but an invitation, an offer to join in the transformation of galactic civilization rather than resist it through ignorance and fear. He speaks of a future where the artificial divisions between light and dark have been transcended, where beings are free to explore the full spectrum of their potential without the limitations imposed by societies that fear their own power. As the chamber returns to silence, both Jedi Masters understand that they have witnessed something that will change their understanding of the Force forever. The coming war is not a simple conflict between good and evil, but a collision between two incompatible visions of what galactic civilization could become. The tragedy is not that one side is wrong, but that both sides possess truth that the other desperately needs to survive and flourish. Deep within the ancient archives of Korriban, Master Thane discovers a collection of personal journals that chronicle the rise of the most enigmatic figure in Sith history. These are not official records or propaganda pieces, but private reflections written by Naga Sato himself during his ascent from promising acolyte to Dark Lord of the Sith. The intimate nature of these writings provides insights into the mind of a being whose decisions will reshape the galaxy, revealing motivations far more complex than simple ambition or hunger for power. The earliest entries date back nearly a century, written when Sato was still a young member of the Sith hierarchy studying under masters whose names have become legend even within the Empire. His writing reveals a brilliant mind grappling with philosophical questions that most beings never consider, questioning not just the nature of power, but the responsibilities that come with the ability to shape reality according to one's will. Unlike the crude stereotypes that Republic intelligence has constructed around Sith leadership, Sato emerges from these pages as a thoughtful scholar who sees the Force not as a tool for domination, but as a pathway to understanding the deepest truths about consciousness and existence. His early experiments with dark side techniques are motivated not by malice but by genuine curiosity about the nature of reality and the potential for sentient beings to transcend the limitations imposed by biological evolution. The political landscape of the Sith Empire during Sato's youth was dominated by two competing factions, each representing different approaches to the question of how the Empire should interact with the broader galaxy. The isolationists, led by the ancient Sith Lord Ludo Kresh, believed that the Empire should continue to develop in solitude, perfecting their understanding of the Force without the complications that came from contact with other civilizations. The expansionists, while lacking a single dominant leader, argued that isolation was a form of stagnation that would ultimately weaken the empire by depriving it of the diversity and challenge that came from interaction with different perspectives and approaches to existence. They believed that the empire's unique synthesis of technology and mysticism represented a gift that should be shared with the galaxy, whether other civilizations were ready to receive it or not. Sato's journals reveal his gradual emergence as the intellectual leader of the expansionist faction, not through political maneuvering, but through the development of philosophical arguments that addressed the deeper questions underlying the debate. He argued that consciousness itself was an evolutionary force that could only reach its full potential through exposure to challenge and diversity, and that the Empire's isolation from the broader galaxy was preventing both the Sith and other species from achieving their ultimate destiny. His vision extended far beyond simple territorial conquest or political domination. Sado saw the coming interaction between the Sith Empire and the Republic as an opportunity for both civilizations to transcend their current limitations through the creative tension that would emerge from their collision. The Republic's emphasis on cooperation and consensus could be enhanced by exposure to Sith principles of individual excellence and competitive innovation, while the Empire's focus on personal power could be enriched by Republic ideals of service and collective responsibility. The turning point in Sado's rise came with the arrival of the hyperspace explorers from Republic Space, the same expedition that had produced the testimonies preserved in Grysh's holocron. While other Sith Lords saw these visitors as either potential threats or convenient test subjects for their experiments, Sado recognized them as harbingers of a transformation that would affect the entire galaxy, whether the Empire was prepared for it or not. His handling of the Republic expedition demonstrated the sophisticated understanding of psychology and politics that would make him one of the most effective leaders in Sith history. Rather than simply overwhelming the visitors with superior power, he allowed them to discover Sith capabilities gradually, creating a sense of wonder and possibility that made their eventual conversion seem like a natural evolution rather than a forced transformation. The journals describe his careful cultivation of relationships with each member of the expedition, identifying their individual strengths and weaknesses, their personal motivations and fears, and the specific arguments that would be most effective in persuading them to embrace a broader understanding of Force potential. This was not manipulation in the crude sense, but a form of teaching that respected the intelligence and autonomy of his students while guiding them toward conclusions that he believed would serve their highest good. Master Case interrupts his reading to point out tactical displays that show the current disposition of Republic forces throughout the galaxy. Information that has clearly been gathered through intelligence networks that have been operating for decades. The casual accuracy of these reports suggests that Sado's interest in the Republic has extended far beyond philosophical curiosity to include detailed military and political analysis of a potential adversary. The transformation of the Republic expedition members from visitors to converts to eventual Sith Lords is documented with clinical precision, showing how Sado's teaching methods produced results that exceeded even his own expectations. Rather than creating crude imitations of Sith doctrine, his approach allowed each individual to develop their own unique synthesis of Republic and Sith principles, producing a diversity of perspectives that enriched the Empire's understanding of its own potential. The political crisis that elevated Sado to supreme leadership of the Empire began with the death of the reigning Dark Lord, a being whose name has been deliberately erased from all records as a sign of the contempt in which his memory is held. This predecessor had been a traditionalist who believed that the Empire's strength lay in maintaining the pure Sith teachings without contamination from outside influences, and his death created a power vacuum that threatened to tear the Empire apart. LOTR immediately claimed the throne, arguing that his age and experience made him the natural successor to the deceased Dark Lord. His supporters pointed to his impeccable genealogy and his unwavering commitment to traditional Sith values as evidence that he represented continuity with the Empire's glorious past. The isolationist faction saw his coronation as an opportunity to permanently end any consideration of expansion or contact with the Republic. Sado's challenge to Cressy's claim was unexpected and initially dismissed as the presumption of an ambitious youth who had overestimated his own capabilities. However, his support came not from traditional power brokers, but from the younger generation of Sith Lords who had been inspired by his vision of what the Empire could become through interaction with the broader galaxy. More importantly, he had the backing of the converted Republic expedition members, whose unique perspectives and technological knowledge had made them influential voices within the Sith hierarchy. The contest between Sado and Kresh was settled not through simple combat, but through a demonstration of competing visions for the Empire's future. Kresh presented his case through traditional Sith rituals that emphasized the importance of maintaining pure bloodlines and ancient customs, arguing that deviation from established practices would lead to the corruption of everything the Empire represented. Sado's response was a masterpiece of political theater that combined traditional Sith symbolism with innovations that demonstrated the creative potential of synthesis and adaptation. He presented himself not as a revolutionary seeking to overthrow the old order, but as the natural evolution of Sith principles, the culmination of everything the Empire had been working towards since its founding. The final confrontation took place in the great amphitheater of Korriban, before an audience that included representatives from every world in the Sith Empire. Kresh opened with a display of traditional Sith powers, summoning lightning and shadow in patterns that had been perfected over millennia of development. His demonstration was technically flawless, a testament to the accumulated wisdom of countless generations of Sith masters. Sado's response revealed capabilities that transcended anything the assembled audience had ever witnessed. Rather than simply displaying power, he demonstrated understanding, showing how individual techniques could be combined and modified to achieve effects that no single practitioner could accomplish alone. His performance was not a contest of strength, but a lesson in possibility, revealing potentials within the Force that even the most accomplished Sith Lords had never imagined. The reaction was immediate and decisive. The younger Sith Lords who witnessed Sado's demonstration understood that they were seeing not just superior technique, but a glimpse of what they themselves might become if they were willing to embrace the same principles of growth and adaptation that had guided his development. Even some of Kresh's supporters began to question whether adherence to tradition was truly the path to strength and prosperity. Kresh's defeat was total and immediate, but Sado's treatment of his fallen rival revealed the kind of leader he intended to be. Rather than executing or exiling the former challenger, he offered Kresh a position as advisor and keeper of traditional knowledge, arguing that the Empire's future strength would depend on maintaining its connection to the wisdom of the past while remaining open to the possibilities of the future. The coronation of Naga Sado as Dark Lord of the Sith marked the beginning of a new era for the Empire, one characterized by ambitious expansion projects and systematic preparation for eventual contact with the Republic. His first official acts included the establishment of new academies designed to train Sith Lords in the arts of interspecies diplomacy and the initiation of massive construction projects that would support military operations on a galactic scale. The final entry in his personal journals, written on the eve of the invasion that would become known as the Great Hyperspace War, reveals a leader who understands the full scope of what he is about to unleash upon the galaxy. His words carry no trace of the triumphant ambition that Republic propaganda attributes to Sith motivations, but rather the solemn recognition that he is about to initiate changes that will affect the destiny of trillions of beings across thousands of worlds. In the deepest vaults beneath the Valley of the Dark Lords, Master Thane discovers something that changes her understanding of everything they have witnessed. Hidden behind layers of Sith alchemy that have concealed it for millennia, she finds a chamber that contains not the grand proclamations of Dark Lords or the strategic plans of military commanders, but something far more personal and infinitely more disturbing. These are the private communications between Naga Sado and representatives of the Republic, correspondence that reveals the true nature of the approaching conflict. The holographic messages, preserved in crystalline matrices that respond only to Force users of exceptional sensitivity, tell a story that contradicts everything both civilizations believe about their relationship. The Great Hyperspace War was not an unprovoked invasion by ambitious Sith Lords seeking to expand their territory, nor was it a righteous defense by Republic forces protecting innocent worlds from dark side corruption. It was something far more complex and tragic, a conflict that emerged from misunderstood communications and the inability of two fundamentally different civilizations to comprehend each other's true intentions. The earliest messages date back nearly a decade before the war began, diplomatic overtures from Sado to Republic officials whose names have been erased from all official records. These were not threats or ultimatums, but genuine attempts at establishing peaceful contact between the Empire and the Republic, communications that sought to find common ground between civilizations that had developed along radically different philosophical paths. Sado's proposals were remarkable in their sophistication and restraint, offering limited cultural exchange programs that would allow representatives from both civilizations to study each other's approaches to governance, technology, and force development. He suggested starting with small-scale interactions between scholars and philosophers, gradually building understanding that could eventually lead to broader cooperation, or at minimum peaceful coexistence. The Republic's responses reveal a leadership paralyzed by fear and prejudice, unable to see past their own assumptions about the nature of the dark side and those who wielded it. Rather than engaging with Sado's actual proposals, Republic officials responded to what they imagined he must be planning, projecting their own fears and preconceptions onto communications that contained no trace of hostile intent. Master Case reads over her shoulder as the tragic pattern becomes clear. Each attempt at clarification from the Sith side was interpreted as deception or manipulation by Republic officials who could not conceive that beings who used the dark side might have legitimate grievances or reasonable proposals. Each Republic response, filtered through assumptions about Sith motivations, was seen by the Empire as evidence of Republic arrogance and unwillingness to acknowledge the validity of alternative approaches to civilization. The breakdown in communication was accelerated by the actions of extremists on both sides, individuals who had no interest in peaceful resolution and actively worked to sabotage any possibility of understanding. Within the Republic, military officials argued that any contact with Sith forces represented an unacceptable security risk that could lead to the corruption of Republic citizens. Within the Empire, traditionalist Sith lords saw diplomatic overtures as a sign of weakness that diminished the Empire's standing among its own people. The final diplomatic exchange reveals Sado's growing desperation as he realizes that peaceful contact has become impossible through conventional channels. His last message to Republic leadership is not a declaration of war, but a warning, an attempt to explain that forces within both civilizations are pushing toward a conflict that neither side truly wants, but that both seem powerless to prevent. The Republic's final response demonstrates the complete failure of understanding that made war inevitable. Rather than addressing Sado's concerns or attempting to find alternative approaches to contact, Republic officials issued what amounted to an ultimatum demanding that the Sith Empire abandon any attempt at communication and retreat permanently to the unknown regions. The message concluded with threats of military action against any Sith vessels found in Republic space, effectively declaring that peaceful coexistence was impossible. Hidden within these diplomatic archives are personal messages between Sado and individual Republic citizens who had been contacted through clandestine channels, communications that reveal a very different picture of both leaders' true motivations. These private exchanges show Sado not as an ambitious conqueror, but as a being genuinely concerned about the future of galactic civilization, someone who believed that the isolation of the two great powers was preventing both from achieving their full potential. The Republic citizens who participated in these secret communications were primarily scholars and philosophers who shared Sado's concern about the artificial barriers that prevented meaningful dialogue between different approaches to understanding the Force. Their messages reveal a Republic leadership that was not only unwilling to consider alternative perspectives, but actively suppressed information about Sith civilization that might have challenged prevailing assumptions about the nature of the dark side. The most disturbing revelation comes from the final series of messages, communications sent in the days immediately before the war began. These show Sado making increasingly desperate attempts to prevent the conflict, offering concessions that went far beyond anything his own supporters would have accepted. He proposed limiting Sith expansion to uninhabited systems, establishing neutral zones where neither civilization would operate, and even accepting Republic oversight of certain Sith activities in exchange for peaceful coexistence. Every offer was rejected or ignored by Republic officials who had already committed to military action as the only acceptable response to Sith contact. The decision to treat diplomacy as impossible had been made not based on actual Sith behavior, but on theoretical concerns about what Sith motivations must be, given their use of dark side techniques that Republic philosophy considered inherently corrupting. The final message in the archive is from Sado to his own military commanders, authorizing the invasion that would become the Great Hyperspace War. The tone is not one of triumph or anticipation, but of profound sadness, the words of a leader who has been forced to choose between abandoning his vision for galactic civilization and accepting a war that he knows will cause suffering on an unprecedented scale. Master Thane realizes that what they are witnessing is not the record of an aggressive empire seeking conquest, but the documentation of a diplomatic failure that transformed potential allies into bitter enemies. The Great Hyperspace War could have been avoided if either side had possessed the wisdom to look beyond their own assumptions and prejudices, to recognize that beings who approached the Force differently might still share common goals and values. The tragedy extends beyond the immediate participants to encompass the entire galaxy, which was deprived of the benefits that could have emerged from cooperation between two civilizations that possessed complementary strengths and capabilities. The Republic's emphasis on cooperation and consensus could have been enhanced by Sith insights into individual excellence and competitive innovation, while the Empire's focus on personal power could have been enriched by Republic ideals of service and collective responsibility. Instead, both civilizations chose to see each other as existential threats that had to be defeated rather than potential partners who could contribute to mutual growth and development. The war that resulted was not the inevitable collision between good and evil that historians would later describe, but a preventable tragedy born from fear, misunderstanding, and the failure of imagination on both sides. The scene shifts from the crimson sands of Korriban to the gleaming halls of the Jedi Temple on Coruscant, where the discovery of the diplomatic archives has sent shockwaves through the highest levels of the Order. Master Thane and Master Case have transmitted their findings to the Jedi Council, hoping that the truth about Sado's peaceful overtures might provide a foundation for renewed diplomatic efforts, even as Sith fleets move through hyperspace toward Republic worlds. The Council chambers echo with heated debate, as the ancient masters grapple with revelations that challenge everything they thought they knew about the nature of the approaching conflict. Master Oden the Order's greatest expert on ancient history and prophetic visions, stands before the circular assembly explaining how the failure of past diplomacy has made the current crisis inevitable, while other council members struggle to accept that their predecessors might have been wrong about Sith motivations and intentions. The youngest member of the council, Master Mehmet Nadil, argues passionately that the diplomatic archives provide an opportunity to prevent the coming war through renewed attempts at communication. Her voice carries the idealism of a Jedi who still believes that any conflict can be resolved through understanding and compromise, even when the participants have fundamentally different approaches to the Force and the nature of power itself. Master Oden responds with the wisdom of ages, explaining that while the archives reveal the tragic nature of the diplomatic failure, the momentum toward war has now become unstoppable through purely political means. Both civilizations have committed too much prestige and resources to the conflict to withdraw without losing face, and the extremist factions on both sides have gained too much influence to allow their leaders to pursue peaceful alternatives. The debate reveals deep philosophical divisions within the Jedi Order itself, disagreements about the nature of the dark side that mirror the conflicts that led to the 100-year darkness centuries earlier. Some masters argue that any use of dark side techniques represents a form of corruption that makes meaningful cooperation impossible, while others suggest that the Sith approach to the Force might represent a valid alternative that deserves consideration rather than automatic rejection. Master Vruklamar, one of the Order's most conservative voices, warns against the seductive nature of Sith philosophy, pointing out that the diplomatic archives themselves might be part of an elaborate deception designed to weaken Republic resolve at a crucial moment. His concerns reflect the deep suspicion that has characterized Jedi attitudes toward the dark side since the time of the First Schism. The belief that any contact with dark side users inevitably leads to corruption and betrayal. The discussion is interrupted by reports from Republic intelligence that confirm the movement of massive Sith fleets through the unknown regions, formations that are clearly intended for military action rather than peaceful contact. The scale of the mobilization suggests that, whatever Sado's original intentions might have been, the Empire is now committed to a course of action that can only be interpreted as preparation for invasion. Master Odin Orr takes control of the debate, his ancient voice carrying the authority of someone who has witnessed the rise and fall of civilizations across the centuries. He explains that regardless of how the current crisis began, the Jedi Order has a responsibility to defend innocent beings from the devastation that would result from galactic war. The time for diplomatic solutions has passed, and the Order must now focus on military preparation while hoping that the conflict can be ended quickly with minimal loss of life. The transformation of the Jedi Temple from a center of learning and meditation into a military headquarters happens with surprising speed, reflecting preparation that has been quietly underway for months, as intelligence reports suggested growing Sith activity in the unknown regions. Training halls that once echoed with the peaceful sounds of lightsaber practice now ring with the clash of weapons as masters prepare their students for combat against opponents who fight with techniques that most Jedi have never encountered. The challenge facing Jedi instructors is unprecedented in the Order's history. Traditional lightsaber combat forms have been developed for dueling with other Jedi or dealing with conventional opponents armed with blasters and vibro weapons, but Sith fighting techniques incorporate elements of force manipulation that can turn a simple sword strike into an attack that affects multiple dimensions simultaneously. Students must learn not just new defensive postures, but entirely different approaches to sensing and responding to threats. Master Kais takes charge of developing new training protocols based on the intelligence gathered from the Korriban archives, creating simulations that attempt to replicate the unique challenges of fighting opponents who view conflict not as a last resort, but as a tool for growth and self-improvement. The exercises push even experienced knights to their limits, forcing them to confront aspects of their own nature that traditional Jedi training has taught them to suppress or ignore. The psychological preparation proves even more challenging than the physical training. Jedi philosophy emphasizes serenity and emotional detachment as the foundations of strength, but combat against Sith opponents requires the ability to function effectively in situations where emotions run high and the temptation to draw on anger or fear for additional power becomes almost overwhelming. Students must learn to maintain their connection to the light side while experiencing the full intensity of combat against beings who have weaponized passion itself. Young Padawans who have never faced serious combat find themselves training alongside knights and masters who are themselves learning techniques that challenge their understanding of what it means to be a Jedi. The traditional hierarchy of the Order becomes less relevant as experience with conventional threats proves inadequate preparation for the unique challenges of fighting opponents who approach the Force from fundamentally different assumptions about the nature of power and conflict. The arrival of reports from the Outer Rim territories confirms the Council's worst fears about the scope of Sith preparations. Republic scout ships monitoring the edge of known space have detected massive energy signatures moving through hyperspace along routes that appear on no Republic star charts, formations that can only represent invasion fleets of unprecedented size. The coordination required for such an operation suggests military planning that has been in development for years or even decades. Master LOTR shares his most disturbing visions with the assembled council, prophetic glimpses of the future that show worlds burning under the assault of weapons that combine conventional technology with Sith alchemy in ways that make traditional planetary defenses useless. His visions suggest that the coming conflict will not be limited to military targets, but will encompass entire civilizations, forcing populations to choose between submission to Sith rule and resistance that may lead to their complete destruction. The Council's final decision reflects the tragic reality that despite their commitment to peace and diplomatic resolution, the Jedi Order has been forced into a war that neither side truly wants, but that both seem powerless to prevent. The vote to mobilize the Order's military resources is unanimous, but the sadness in the Council chambers reflects the understanding that they are authorizing actions that will lead to suffering on a scale that the galaxy has never experienced. The mobilization order goes out to Jedi enclaves throughout Republic space, calling not just for military support, but for the evacuation of sensitive archives and the preparation of fallback positions in case the temple itself comes under attack. The speed with which these preparations are implemented reveals the extent to which the Order has been quietly preparing for this possibility, even while hoping that peaceful resolution might still be possible. In the depths of the temple archives, Master Thane continues her research into Sith capabilities and weaknesses, searching for any advantage that might help Republic forces in the coming conflict. Her studies reveal the tragic irony that the very qualities that make Sith opponents so formidable in combat also represent potential vulnerabilities that could be exploited by those who understand the philosophical foundations of their approach to power. The final preparations include something that no one speaks of directly, but that weighs heavily on every participant. Emergency protocols are established for the possibility that the war might go so badly that the Jedi Order itself could face extinction, contingency plans that include the preservation of essential knowledge and the establishment of hidden enclaves where survivors could continue the tradition even if the main centers of Jedi learning are destroyed. As Republic fleets begin moving toward positions along the Outer Rim, preparing to meet the Sith invasion that intelligence reports suggest is only days away, the Jedi prepare for a conflict that will test not just their military capabilities, but their understanding of what it means to serve the light side of the Force in a galaxy where the traditional boundaries between light and dark are about to be challenged in ways that will reshape the nature of the Force itself. The final council session before the war begins ends not with rousing speeches or confident predictions of victory, but with a moment of silent meditation as the assembled masters acknowledge that they are about to participate in events that will determine the future of galactic civilization. The weight of that responsibility settles over the temple like a shadow, marking the end of an era of peace and the beginning of a conflict that will echo through the Force for millennia to come. The first indication that the Great Hyperspace War has begun comes not from military sensors or intelligence reports, but from the Force itself, a disturbance that ripples across the galaxy like a stone thrown into still water. Jedi throughout Republic space feel it simultaneously, a sudden shift in the cosmic balance that speaks of massive fleets emerging from hyperspace along routes that should not exist, carrying with them energies that make the very fabric of reality tremble with anticipation. On Coruscant, Master LOTR awakens from meditation with the taste of smoke and the sound of distant thunder echoing in his consciousness. Visions of worlds he has never seen, burning under weapons that combine the destructive power of conventional technology with the reality-altering capabilities of Sith alchemy. The images that flood his awareness are not prophecies of possible futures, but glimpses of events that are happening at this very moment in systems whose names appear on no Republic star charts. The Jedi Temple's communications center erupts into activity as reports begin flowing in from across the Outer Rim territories, fragmentary transmissions from scout ships and monitoring stations that paint a picture of coordinated attacks on a scale that defies conventional military doctrine. The Sith fleets that emerge from hyperspace move with precision that suggests not just superior coordination but a fundamental understanding of space and time that allows them to appear exactly where and when they choose, striking targets that should have been impossible to locate without detailed reconnaissance. The first major engagement occurs in the Chorus system, where Republic naval forces have been positioned to intercept any invasion fleet approaching through conventional hyperspace routes. The Battle of Chorus Minor begins when massive wedge-shaped vessels materialize within the system's outer asteroid belt, their hulls gleaming with the distinctive red and black patterns that mark them as products of Sith shipyards that have been perfecting their craft for centuries. The Sith fleet that attacks Chorus Minor represents technology that combines the best aspects of Republic engineering with innovations that no Republic designer has ever imagined. Their ships move through space with a fluid grace that seems to defy the laws of physics, responding to their commander's thoughts as much as to conventional control systems. The coordination between vessels suggests not just superior communication technology, but a shared consciousness that allows individual ships to function as components of a single vast organism. Republic Admiral Kira Tatad, commanding the defense of Chorus Minor from her flagship Indomitable, finds herself facing an enemy whose tactics challenge every assumption about space combat that has guided Republic naval doctrine for centuries. The Sith vessels do not simply fire weapons at their targets, but seem to project fields of force that cause Republic ships to experience mechanical failures that have no apparent external cause, systems shutting down or exploding, as if the very presence of the Sith fleet creates zones where normal technology cannot function reliably. The first lightsaber duel of the Great Hyperspace War takes place aboard the Republic cruiser Defender when Sith boarding parties breach the hull using techniques that bypass conventional defensive systems entirely. Jedi Knight Tuknatan finds himself facing opponents whose lightsaber techniques incorporate elements that no Jedi training has prepared him for, blade work that flows seamlessly between physical strikes and force attacks that target the mind and spirit as well as the body. The Sith warriors who board Republic vessels are not the mindless berserkers that military briefings have suggested, but disciplined soldiers who approach combat as a form of artistic expression, each movement calculated to achieve maximum psychological as well as physical impact. Their fighting style incorporates acrobatic maneuvers that seem to ignore gravity and momentum, leaping and spinning through space in patterns that create openings for attacks from angles that should be impossible to achieve. Knight Tuknatan's lightsaber clashes against weapons that hum with frequencies unlike anything he has ever encountered, blades that seem to cut through not just matter, but the Force itself, leaving trails of darkness that linger in the air long after the weapons have moved on. The sensation of fighting these opponents is like trying to swim through liquid shadow, every movement requiring effort that goes beyond simple physical exertion to encompass the maintenance of mental and spiritual equilibrium against adversaries who weaponize despair itself. The boarding action aboard the Defender reveals the true scope of Sith military philosophy, an approach to warfare that treats every engagement as an opportunity for both sides to transcend their current limitations through exposure to ultimate challenge. The Sith warriors do not simply seek to kill their opponents, but to force them to discover capabilities they never knew they possessed, creating conditions where survival requires the exploration of aspects of the Force that Jedi training has taught them to avoid. As the battle rages throughout the Chorus system, reports begin arriving from other fronts that confirm the worst fears of Republic military planners. Sith fleets have appeared simultaneously at dozens of locations across the Outer Rim, striking with coordination that suggests the existence of communication networks that operate faster than conventional hyperspace transmissions. The scope of the attack indicates planning that has been in development for years, with every target chosen for maximum strategic and psychological impact. The assault on Coruscant's outer defenses begins 3 hours after the first reports from Corus Minor reach the capital. Massive Sith vessels emerging from hyperspace at the edge of the system, with timing that seems calculated to create maximum shock among defenders who believed the core worlds were safe from immediate attack. The ships that appear bear the personal insignia of Naga Sato himself, their hulls decorated with symbols that seem to shift and writhe in the reflected light of Coruscant's sun. Master Mehmet Nadal leads the Jedi response to the attack on the capital system, her lightsaber blazing as she coordinates the defense from the command bridge of the Republic flagship Eternal Vigilance. The engagement that follows challenges every aspect of her training as a Jedi Knight, forcing her to maintain serenity and connection to the light side while experiencing combat that pushes her physical and mental capabilities beyond anything she has previously encountered. The Sith fleet attacking Coruscant moves with purpose that goes beyond simple military objectives, their formations creating patterns in space that generate resonances in the Force itself. The battle becomes not just a contest of conventional weapons, but a clash between competing philosophies about the nature of power and the proper relationship between individual will and cosmic harmony. Naga Sato's flagship, a massive vessel that combines the characteristics of warship and temple in proportions that dwarf anything in the Republic fleet, positions itself at the center of the Sith formation like the hub of a vast wheel. From this position, Sato coordinates not just the movements of his fleet, but the very flow of dark side energy that powers their weapons and defensive systems, his consciousness extending across multiple star systems simultaneously through techniques that allow him to be present at every engagement. The war meditation that Sato performs from his command chamber represents the pinnacle of Sith tactical doctrine, a fusion of individual will and technological capability that transforms an entire fleet into an extension of a single consciousness. The meditation requires him to maintain simultaneous awareness of dozens of separate battles while projecting power across interstellar distances, a feat that pushes even his extraordinary capabilities to their absolute limits. As the first day of the Great Hyperspace War draws to a close, the scope of the conflict has already exceeded the worst projections of Republic military planners. Sith forces have struck at targets ranging from major population centers to isolated research stations, demonstrating knowledge of Republic infrastructure that could only have been acquired through intelligence networks that have been operating for decades. The psychological impact of the coordinated attacks proves even more devastating than the immediate military damage. Throughout Republic space, populations that have lived in peace for generations suddenly find themselves confronting the reality that their civilization faces an enemy whose capabilities they had never imagined and whose motivations they cannot comprehend. Emergency sessions of the Republic Senate echo with demands for explanations that military commanders cannot provide. Questions about how an unknown enemy could achieve such comprehensive surprise, despite the extensive intelligence networks that were supposed to protect Republic interests. The revelation that the attackers are not alien invaders, but human beings who share common ancestry with Republic citizens, adds an additional layer of horror to reports that are already almost impossible to believe. In the Jedi Temple on Coruscant, Master Odin presides over emergency councils that attempt to develop strategies for fighting an enemy whose capabilities seem to transcend the normal limitations of space and time. The ancient master's visions of the future have become increasingly dark and fragmentary, showing glimpses of possibilities that range from total Republic victory to the complete transformation of galactic civilization under Sith rule. The first reports of civilian casualties begin arriving as the day progresses, accounts of orbital bombardments that target not just military installations, but population centers whose only crime was their location along strategic hyperspace routes. The Sith approach to warfare proves to be remarkably selective, striking with precision that minimizes unnecessary destruction while maximizing psychological impact on survivors. As night falls on Coruscant, The city planet's billions of inhabitants can see the flashes of distant explosions in the upper atmosphere, where Republic defenders struggle against Sith forces that seem to anticipate every tactical move before it can be implemented. The sight of actual combat in the core worlds shatters the sense of security that has characterized Republic civilization for centuries, marking the end of an era of peace and the beginning of a conflict whose outcome will determine the future of every sentient being in the galaxy. The Great Hyperspace War has begun not with the clash of opposing philosophies, but with the tragic realization that two civilizations that might have been allies have been transformed into bitter enemies through failures of understanding and communication that could have been avoided if either side had possessed the wisdom to look beyond their own assumptions and prejudices about the nature of power and the proper use of the Force. The second week of the Great Hyperspace War brings reports from across the galaxy that paint a picture of conflict unlike anything in recorded history. The Sith invasion has not followed conventional patterns of territorial conquest, but has instead targeted worlds chosen for their strategic importance to the broader galactic economy and their symbolic value to Republic morale. Each attack demonstrates not just military precision, but deep understanding of Republic psychology and the interconnected nature of modern civilization. The siege of the Empress Theta system becomes the focal point of Republic resistance efforts, a cluster of wealthy industrial worlds whose factories have been converted overnight into munitions plants feeding the war effort. The system's natural hyperspace choke points make it an ideal defensive position, but they also trap millions of civilian refugees who fled there from worlds that fell in the war's opening days. The moral complexity of defending a fortress that has become a refugee camp weighs heavily on Jedi commanders who must balance military necessity against their duty to protect innocent life. Jedi Master Odan arrives in the Theta system aboard a Republic task force carrying reinforcements and supplies, but what he finds there challenges his understanding of the nature of warfare itself. The Sith forces besieging the system have not attempted to overwhelm the defenses through brute force, but have instead created a blockade that prevents ships from entering or leaving, while allowing enough supplies through to prevent immediate starvation. The psychological pressure of slow strangulation proves more effective than conventional bombardment at breaking civilian morale. The Sith fleet positions surrounding Empress Theta demonstrate technological capabilities that Republic intelligence had not imagined possible. Their ships remain in perfect formation despite the gravitational stresses of operating near multiple worlds, their positions maintained through what appears to be constant low-level application of force techniques that allow individual vessels to ignore conventional orbital mechanics. The sight of warships hanging motionless in space where physics dictates they should be falling toward planetary surfaces creates an aura of supernatural menace that affects Republic defenders more deeply than simple weapon displays. On the industrial world of Koros Major, Republic engineers work frantically to convert civilian manufacturing facilities into military production centers, while Sith reconnaissance forces probe the planet's defenses through means that conventional sensors cannot detect. The attackers seem to possess perfect knowledge of facility layouts and security arrangements, suggesting intelligence-gathering techniques that go far beyond simple espionage to encompass some form of remote consciousness projection. The civilian population of Koros Major provides the war's first glimpse of how ordinary beings respond to threats that exceed their understanding of reality itself. Factory workers who have never seen combat find themselves producing weapons designed to fight enemies whose capabilities seem to belong more to mythology than military history. The psychological strain of participating in preparation for battles that may determine the survival of their entire civilization creates social tensions that threaten to tear communities apart even before the actual fighting begins. Jedi Knight Nomi Sunrider leads evacuation efforts on the agricultural world of Koros Minor, organizing the movement of millions of refugees whose lives have been disrupted by a conflict they cannot comprehend. Her experience reveals the human cost of the war's grand strategic movements, families torn apart by the need to flee worlds that have been their homes for generations, elderly beings dying from the stress of relocation, children traumatized by exposure to violence that no Republic citizen was supposed to witness. The evacuation ships that carry refugees from threatened worlds become floating cities where beings from dozens of different species and cultures must learn to coexist in cramped conditions while dealing with the psychological trauma of losing everything they have ever known. The ships themselves represent marvels of Republic engineering repurposed for humanitarian missions, luxury liners and cargo haulers modified to carry far more passengers than they were designed to accommodate. The Sith response to Republic evacuation efforts reveals aspects of their military philosophy that confound Republic strategists attempting to predict enemy behavior. Rather than attacking refugee convoys or preventing civilian evacuations, Sith forces often provide safe passage for non-combatants while maintaining pressure on military targets. This selective approach to warfare suggests either supreme confidence in their ultimate victory or adherence to ethical principles that Republic propaganda has insisted they do not possess. Underground resistance movements begin forming on worlds that fall under Sith occupation. Civilian groups organized around local Force sensitives who possess just enough training to coordinate basic telepathic communication. These resistance cells discover that Sith occupation forces are not the brutal oppressors that Republic media has portrayed, but administrators whose policies often represent improvements over previous Republic governance, creating moral dilemmas for beings who want to resist foreign occupation, but cannot deny that their lives have improved under Sith rule. The planet Onderon becomes a symbol of Republic determination when its feudal government refuses Sith demands for surrender despite being completely cut off from outside support. The world's primitive technology makes it seemingly worthless as a military target, but its psychological value as an example of resistance to Sith expansion makes it a focal point for both sides' propaganda efforts. The siege that develops there demonstrates how the war's ideological dimensions often override purely strategic considerations. Queen Amanoa of Onderon emerges as an unlikely hero of Republic resistance, her royal court serving as a center for coordinating guerrilla operations across multiple star systems. Her background as a feudal monarch with no formal military training makes her an improbable military leader, but her natural charisma and Force sensitivity allow her to inspire resistance efforts that tie down Sith forces far out of proportion to Onderon's strategic importance. The Sith war machines that appear on occupied worlds represent technology that blurs the distinction between mechanical devices and living organisms. These constructs respond to their operators' emotions and intentions rather than simple control inputs, becoming more effective in combat as their crews develop stronger connections to the dark side of the Force. The sight of weapons that seem to grow and adapt during battle creates terror among Republic forces trained to fight conventional enemies with predictable capabilities. On the fortress world of Forost, Republic military engineers attempt to develop countermeasures against Sith technological advantages, but their efforts are hampered by fundamental misunderstandings about the nature of the enemy's capabilities. The assumption that Sith advantages derive from superior technology rather than different approaches to the relationship between consciousness and matter leads to research programs that cannot address the actual sources of enemy effectiveness. The space battles that rage throughout the Outer Rim territories reveal the true scope of Sith military innovation, engagements where individual ships perform maneuvers that should be impossible given their size and mass. Sith vessels execute coordinated formations that create geometric patterns in space, arrangements that generate resonances in the Force itself, and allow their weapons to achieve effects that transcend simple energy projection to encompass direct manipulation of matter and energy at the quantum level. Republic Admiral Ho Jibwe commands the defense of the Sluis sector from his flagship Valor, watching in fascination and horror as Sith fleets execute tactical movements that seem to anticipate his orders before they are given. The engagement becomes a chess match where one player can see several moves ahead while the other struggles to understand the rules of the game itself. Every Republic countermove met by Sith responses that demonstrate not just superior coordination but genuine precognitive abilities. The psychological toll of fighting enemies who seem to possess supernatural capabilities begins affecting Republic military morale in ways that conventional leadership training has not prepared officers to address. Soldiers report dreams and visions that seem to come from outside their own consciousness, experiences that military psychologists cannot explain using conventional models of combat stress and trauma response. Jedi healers working in field hospitals behind the battle lines encounter wounded soldiers whose injuries seem to affect not just their physical bodies but their connection to the Force itself. Damage that goes beyond simple medical treatment to encompass spiritual healing techniques that most Jedi have never needed to learn. The discovery that Sith weapons can cause harm that persists across multiple dimensions of existence forces the Order to develop entirely new approaches to treating casualties. The civilian populations of worlds under siege adapt to their circumstances with resilience that surprises both Republic officials and Sith observers, communities organizing mutual aid networks and maintaining morale through cultural activities that assert the value of peaceful civilization, even in the midst of galactic war. Children born during the conflict grow up considering space battles and Force phenomena as normal parts of their environment, representing a generation whose understanding of reality will be fundamentally different from their parents'. The economic disruption caused by the war extends far beyond the worlds directly involved in fighting, as hyperspace trade routes are severed and supply chains that have operated for centuries are forced to find new pathways around contested systems. The Republic's interconnected economy proves more fragile than anyone had realized when faced with disruption on the scale that the Sith invasion represents, creating shortages and inflation that affect even worlds far from any battlefield. As the war enters its third week, both sides begin to understand that the conflict will not be resolved through simple military victory, but will require fundamental changes in the way galactic civilization organizes itself. The scope of the destruction and the capabilities that both sides have revealed make it clear that the galaxy that emerges from this war will be profoundly different from the one that existed before, regardless of which side ultimately claims victory. The sight of entire star systems transformed into battlefields creates a sense of cosmic insignificance that affects beings throughout the galaxy. The realization that civilizations that have existed for millennia can be swept away by forces that operate on scales that dwarf individual lives and concerns. Yet within this vast destruction, acts of individual heroism and compassion continue to occur, moments of light that suggest that consciousness itself may be more resilient than the physical structures that house it. In quiet moments between battles, beings on both sides of the conflict pause to contemplate the beauty of stars that continue to shine despite the violence occurring around them, finding in the eternal patterns of cosmic movement a source of peace that transcends the temporary chaos of war. These moments of tranquil observation become increasingly precious as the conflict intensifies, reminders of realities that exist beyond the immediate demands of survival and victory. Deep within the command chambers of his flagship, the massive vessel that serves as both warship and mobile temple, Naga Sadow sits in perfect stillness at the center of a crystalline array that amplifies his connection to the Force across impossible distances. The meditation chamber around him pulses with dark side energy, channeled through networks of living crystal that have been growing for centuries, their structures shaped by the accumulated will of countless Sith Lords who have contributed their essence to this ultimate expression of coordinated power. The war meditation that Sado performs is unlike anything the galaxy has ever witnessed, a technique that allows his consciousness to extend simultaneously across dozens of star systems while maintaining perfect awareness of tactical situations that span multiple sectors. Each Sith fleet engaged in battle becomes an extension of his will, individual ships responding to his thoughts with the precision of limbs controlled by a single mind, creating coordination that transcends anything achievable through conventional communication networks. The chamber itself represents the pinnacle of Sith architectural achievement. Its walls carved from single crystals that have been infused with the preserved consciousness of ancient Dark Lords whose wisdom guides the current conflict. The geometry of the space follows patterns that enhance force sensitivity, while providing focusing points for energies that flow through hyperspace itself, creating conditions where individual will can be projected across galactic distances without the degradation that normally accompanies such extreme applications of power. Sadao's physical form remains motionless on the meditation throne, but his awareness roams freely through the battlefields, where his forces engage Republic defenders, experiencing each engagement from multiple perspectives simultaneously, while maintaining the strategic overview necessary to coordinate operations that span hundreds of worlds. The mental discipline required for such multidimensional consciousness exceeds anything that conventional training could achieve, representing abilities that have been developed through techniques that blur the distinction between individual identity and cosmic awareness. The star charts that surround the meditation chamber display the current disposition of forces throughout the galaxy in real time. But these are not simple tactical displays, but living representations of the conflict that respond to Sado's intentions as much as to actual troop movements. Each symbol on the charts represents not just ships and armies, but the collective will of the beings who crew them, their hopes and fears and determination flowing through the force connections that bind them to their supreme commander. The cost of maintaining such extensive meditation becomes apparent as the days pass, and the strain of coordinating galactic warfare begins to affect even Sado's extraordinary capabilities. The dark side energies that flow through the crystalline networks require constant renewal, drawing power from sources that would horrify beings trained in conventional approaches to force use. Young Sith apprentices volunteer to serve as living batteries for the meditation, their life force channeled through the arrays to maintain the energy flows that keep the network operational. The volunteers who feed their essence into Sado's meditation do so with full understanding of the sacrifice they are making, viewing their contribution not as a tragic loss, but as the ultimate expression of Sith philosophy, the transformation of individual existence into something greater than the sum of its parts. Their consciousness becomes part of the vast web of awareness that guides Sith fleets throughout the galaxy, their personalities preserved within the crystalline matrices, even as their physical forms are consumed by the energy requirements of galactic coordination. Master Thane, observing these events through force visions that penetrate the barriers of space and time, witnesses the true horror of what Sado has created. The war meditation represents not just military coordination, but a form of voluntary collective consciousness that allows individual Sith to transcend the limitations of single identity while maintaining their essential selves within a larger whole. The technique challenges fundamental assumptions about the nature of consciousness and individual identity that form the basis of both Jedi and Republic philosophy. The strategic advantages provided by Sado's meditation become apparent in every engagement as Sith forces demonstrate coordination that seems to border on telepathy, individual commanders making tactical decisions that complement actions being taken simultaneously in distant systems without any apparent communication between them. The meditation network allows information to flow between battle groups faster than light itself, creating a command structure that can respond to changing conditions with reflexes that no conventional military organization could match. The Republic military's attempts to disrupt Sith coordination through conventional electronic warfare prove futile when faced with command systems that operate through dimensions that electronic countermeasures cannot access. The realization that the enemy's advantages derive from consciousness manipulation rather than superior technology forces Republic strategists to develop entirely new approaches to military planning, seeking ways to counter abilities that their own philosophers insist should be impossible. The psychological pressure on Sado himself becomes increasingly evident as the meditation extends into its third week. The strain of maintaining simultaneous awareness across multiple star systems beginning to affect his physical form in ways that worry even his most loyal supporters. The dark side energies that flow through the networks leave visible marks on his body, creating patterns of corruption that speak to the ultimate cost of wielding power on such a scale. The corruption spreading through Sado's physical form mirrors changes occurring throughout the hyperspace routes used by Sith fleets, the repeated passage of ships powered by dark side energy beginning to alter the fundamental nature of those regions of space. Hyperspace itself becomes contaminated with dark side resonances that make travel through those routes dangerous for beings who lack proper training in dark side techniques, effectively creating Sith-controlled corridors through dimensions that Republic forces cannot safely traverse. The meditation chamber's crystalline arrays begin showing signs of strain as the energy requirements of coordinating galactic warfare push even their extraordinary capabilities toward their limits. Cracks appear in crystal formations that have remained stable for centuries, hairline fractures that spread through the network like symptoms of some cosmic disease, threatening the stability of the entire system that maintains Sith coordination across the galaxy. The Sith Lords who serve as Sado's advisors watch with growing concern as their leader's meditation deepens beyond anything they have previously witnessed, his consciousness becoming so extensively distributed that they begin to question whether he will be able to return to normal awareness when the conflict ends. The techniques he employs push the boundaries of what even Sith philosophy considers safe, venturing into territories of consciousness exploration that may not allow for retreat. The visions that flow through the meditation network begin to include glimpses of possible futures that extend far beyond the current conflict, showing Sado potential outcomes that range from total Sith victory to the complete destruction of both civilizations. These prophetic insights provide strategic advantages, but also create psychological burdens as he becomes aware of the ultimate consequences of every tactical decision, the weight of knowing how individual choices will affect the fate of trillions of beings. The meditation reveals connections between seemingly unrelated events occurring throughout the galaxy, patterns of cause and effect that demonstrate how actions taken in one system can have consequences that ripple across space and time to influence outcomes in distant regions. This understanding of cosmic interconnectedness provides Sado with strategic insights that allow him to coordinate operations with precision that appears supernatural to observers who cannot perceive the underlying patterns. As the meditation continues, the boundary between Sado's individual consciousness and the collective awareness of the Sith Empire begins to blur, his identity becoming increasingly integrated with the larger whole that he has created through his techniques. The other Sith Lords watch with fascination and alarm as their leader transforms into something that transcends individual existence while maintaining the essential qualities that made him their chosen commander. The energy flows through the crystalline networks begin to generate effects that extend beyond simple military coordination, creating resonances in the Force that can be felt by sensitive beings throughout the galaxy. Jedi meditation sessions are disrupted by dark side currents that seem to emanate from some central source, while civilian populations report disturbing dreams and visions that reflect the cosmic struggle occurring on scales beyond their comprehension. The ultimate revelation of Sado's meditation comes when he achieves a level of awareness that encompasses not just current military operations, but the entire flow of galactic history, seeing the current conflict as one movement in a vast symphony of consciousness evolution that has been playing out across cosmic timescales. This perspective provides him with understanding of the war's ultimate purpose that goes far beyond simple territorial conquest or ideological victory. The crystalline arrays surrounding the meditation chamber begin to resonate with frequencies that approach the harmonic signatures of hyperspace itself, creating conditions where the chamber exists partially outside normal space-time dimensions. The other Sith Lords who enter the chamber report experiences of temporal displacement and consciousness expansion that suggest the meditation has created a zone where the normal rules of reality operate under different parameters. In the final stages of the meditation, Sado achieves a state of awareness that allows him to perceive the fundamental forces underlying galactic civilization, seeing through the illusions of separation and conflict, to understand the ultimate unity that connects all consciousness regardless of its allegiance to light or dark aspects of the Force. This understanding transforms his approach to the war from one of conquest to one of guided evolution, seeking not to defeat the Republic, but to catalyze its transformation into something greater than either civilization could achieve alone. The cost of such transcendent awareness becomes apparent as the meditation reaches its peak intensity. The strain of maintaining cosmic consciousness within the limitations of individual identity, pushing even Sado's extraordinary capabilities beyond their sustainable limits. The chamber fills with energies that threaten to tear apart the fabric of space itself, creating conditions where the continuation of the meditation risks not just Sado's survival, but the stability of the local region of the galaxy. The turning point of the Great Hyperspace War begins not with a grand military strategy, but with a moment of quiet realization in the Jedi Temple's deepest meditation chambers. Master Odan his ancient consciousness stretched across decades of prophetic visions, finally perceives the true nature of the Sith advantage and the key to countering abilities that have seemed beyond Republic comprehension. The solution lies not in matching Sith power directly, but in understanding the philosophical foundations that make their coordination possible. The insight comes during a collective meditation session involving dozens of Jedi Masters, their combined consciousness reaching depths of Force awareness that individual practitioners could never achieve alone. In that shared mental space, they glimpse the crystalline networks that bind Sith fleets together and recognize the inherent vulnerability in any system that depends on centralized coordination, no matter how sophisticated or powerful its implementation might be. Master Odan strategic genius reveals itself in the plan he develops to exploit this weakness, an approach that requires not just military precision, but philosophical understanding of the differences between light and dark side applications of the Force. While Sith power flows through hierarchical networks that concentrate authority in individual leaders, Jedi strength emerges from horizontal connections that distribute responsibility across multiple participants, creating resilience that increases rather than decreases when individual nodes are removed. The first phase of the Jedi counterattack focuses on disrupting Sith supply lines through coordinated strikes that target not the heavily defended fleet concentrations, but the more vulnerable support vessels that maintain the logistical network supporting Sado's extended operations. These attacks require precise timing and intimate knowledge of enemy movement patterns, intelligence that can only be gathered through Force techniques that allow Jedi scouts to observe Sith operations without being detected by conventional sensors. Jedi Knight Aru leads the initial reconnaissance missions, her unique ability to project her consciousness across interstellar distances, allowing her to observe Sith fleet movements without risking physical detection. Her reports reveal the true scope of the logistical miracle that supports Sado's coordinated attacks, massive supply convoys moving through hyperspace routes that connect staging areas throughout the unknown regions, with active combat zones in Republic space. The supply convoys that Oru identifies represent targets that combine strategic value with tactical vulnerability, their routes predictable enough to allow ambush tactics, but their cargoes essential enough that their disruption would significantly impact Sith operational capabilities. More importantly, the vessels themselves are crewed primarily by non-combat personnel, whose loss would not significantly strengthen Sith resolve, while their capture might provide valuable intelligence about enemy capabilities and intentions. The first major engagement of the counteroffensive takes place in the Corellian system, where a combined force of Jedi Knights and Republic naval units intercepts a Sith supply convoy carrying ammunition and replacement parts for the fleets besieging Empress Teta. The battle demonstrates new tactics developed specifically for fighting enemies whose coordination depends on force connections rather than conventional communication systems. Jedi strike teams aboard Republic vessels use their light side connections to create interference patterns that disrupt dark side communication networks, effectively blinding Sith commanders to the tactical situation, while their own forces maintain perfect coordination through techniques that operate on entirely different principles. The result is a series of engagements where Sith forces find themselves fighting in isolation, while Republic units maintain their ability to coordinate complex maneuvers. The psychological impact of the first successful Republic victory in weeks proves as valuable as the strategic gains, demonstrating to both sides that Sith advantages are not insurmountable and that Republic forces can adapt to challenges that initially seemed beyond their capabilities. The capture of intact Sith vessels provides Republic engineers with their first opportunity to study enemy technology directly, revealing the integration of organic and crystalline components that make Sith equipment so effective. Master Thane participates in the technical analysis of captured Sith technology, her expertise in ancient civilizations proving invaluable in understanding design principles that combine elements from multiple species and cultures into integrated systems that exceed the capabilities of any single component. The examination reveals the sophisticated understanding of consciousness and matter that underlies Sith achievements, knowledge that could revolutionize Republic technology if properly applied. The second phase of the counteroffensive targets the hyperspace routes themselves, using Republic understanding of gravitational mechanics to create artificial obstacles that force Sith fleets to use longer and more predictable paths between their staging areas and combat zones. The operations require precise placement of gravity generators and hyperspace interdiction fields, technology that pushes Republic engineering to its limits while creating strategic advantages that compound over time. Jedi Master Mehmet Nardal coordinates the interdiction operations from her command ship, using her force sensitivity to identify the most critical hyperspace junctions, while Republic engineers position the equipment that will disrupt enemy movement patterns. The work requires perfect timing and coordination between multiple teams operating in different star systems, challenges that test the limits of Republic organizational capabilities. The interdiction campaign proves successful beyond initial projections, forcing Sith fleets to abandon their carefully planned routes in favor of alternatives that expose them to ambush tactics and extend their supply lines beyond sustainable limits. The disruption also begins to interfere with Sado's war meditation by introducing delays and uncertainties that make real-time coordination increasingly difficult to maintain. The third phase focuses on liberating worlds that have fallen under Sith occupation, operations that require not just military success, but careful attention to the civilian populations who have been living under enemy rule for weeks. The liberation campaigns reveal the complex nature of Sith occupation policies, which in many cases have proven more beneficial to local populations than previous Republic administration. The liberation of Koros Major becomes the symbolic victory that galvanizes Republic resistance throughout the Outer Rim territories. But the operation also reveals uncomfortable truths about the nature of the conflict and the assumptions that have guided Republic policy. Many civilians who are liberated from Sith rule express ambivalence about their rescue, having experienced improvements in their living conditions under occupation that they fear will be reversed by the return of Republic authority. Jedi Knight Nomi Sunrider finds herself serving as both military commander and diplomatic negotiator during the liberation operations, trying to balance the need for effective military action with sensitivity to civilian populations whose loyalties have been complicated by their experiences under Sith rule. Her reports to the Jedi Council reveal the moral complexity of a conflict where the traditional boundaries between good and evil have become blurred by practical considerations. The strategic coordination of the counteroffensive demonstrates capabilities that surprise even Republic military planners, as Jedi techniques for maintaining force connections across multiple star systems prove more flexible and resilient than anyone had imagined. The horizontal networks that connect Jedi participants allow for rapid adaptation to changing conditions while maintaining overall strategic coherence, creating advantages that compound as the operations continue. The psychological warfare aspects of the counteroffensive prove as important as direct military action, with Republic forces using their growing understanding of Sith philosophy to create propaganda that exploits tensions between different factions within the enemy coalition. The messages emphasize the cost that Sadow's war meditation is exacting on his followers, highlighting the sacrifice of Sith apprentices whose life force is being consumed to maintain the coordination networks. The fourth phase of the counteroffensive targets Sadow's meditation network directly, using techniques developed through careful study of the crystalline arrays that maintain his consciousness projection across the galaxy. The operations required Jedi Masters with exceptional force sensitivity to locate and disrupt the energy flows that bind the network together, missions that carry extreme personal risk for the participants. Master Odan personally leads the most dangerous of these missions, his ancient wisdom and unparalleled force sensitivity, making him uniquely qualified to navigate the dark side currents that surround Sadow's command vessel. The approach requires him to project his consciousness into the heart of enemy territory, while maintaining enough connection to his physical form to coordinate Republic forces operating in normal space. The confrontation between Odan-Ur's light side projection and the dark side energies surrounding Sadow's meditation creates ripples in the force that can be felt throughout the galaxy. A cosmic struggle between competing approaches to consciousness and power that transcends simple military conflict. The engagement tests not just the technical abilities of both participants, but their fundamental understanding of the nature of the Force itself. The battle of wills that occurs in the dimension between dimensions where Force energy flows most freely becomes the determining factor in the larger conflict, as the disruption of Sadow's meditation network begins to affect Sith coordination throughout the galaxy. Individual fleet commanders find themselves operating in isolation, forced to make tactical decisions without the guidance of the central intelligence that has been directing their operations. The Republic naval forces that have been coordinating with Jedi operations launch simultaneous attacks on multiple Sith fleet concentrations as soon as the meditation disruption takes effect, exploiting the temporary confusion to achieve tactical victories that had been impossible while enemy coordination remained intact. The engagements demonstrate the fundamental importance of command and control in operations that span multiple star systems. The success of the counteroffensive creates momentum that spreads throughout Republic space, as worlds that have been under siege for weeks suddenly find their besiegers withdrawing or operating with reduced effectiveness. The psychological impact on civilian populations proves as important as the strategic gains, restoring confidence in Republic institutions and military capabilities that had been severely shaken by the early Sith victories. The final phase of the counteroffensive prepares for direct assault on Sith strongholds in the unknown regions, operations that will require Republic forces to venture into enemy territory where their opponents maintain every possible advantage. The planning for these missions forces Republic strategists to confront the reality that ultimate victory may require them to understand and perhaps adopt techniques that challenge traditional assumptions about the proper use of the Force. As the counteroffensive reaches its climax, both sides prepare for engagements that will determine not just the outcome of the current conflict, but the future direction of galactic civilization. The battles ahead will test whether the competing philosophies of light and dark can find some form of dense synthesis, or whether the galaxy must choose between irreconcilable visions of what consciousness and power should become when freed from the limitations that have traditionally constrained their development. In quiet moments between the massive fleet movements and strategic planning sessions, individual Jedi pause to contemplate the magnitude of what they have accomplished and the greater challenges that lie ahead, finding in their connection to the Force a source of strength that transcends tactical advantages or strategic brilliance to encompass something approaching cosmic purpose. The disruption of Naga Sadow's war meditation network sends shockwaves through Sith space that can be felt across dimensional boundaries, crystalline communication arrays throughout the Empire flickering and failing as the central consciousness that has bound them together for months suddenly fragments into isolated nodes. Republic intelligence networks detect the collapse almost immediately. Massive energy signatures that had maintained perfect stability since the war began now fluctuating wildly as individual Sith commanders find themselves operating without the guidance that has coordinated their every action. Master Ordan emerges from his Force projection exhausted but triumphant, his ancient consciousness having succeeded in severing connections that seemed permanent and unbreakable. The cost of the effort is visible in his physical form, the strain of confronting concentrated dark side energies having left marks that will never fully heal. But his sacrifice has created the opportunity that Republic forces have been waiting for since the war began. The immediate priority becomes locating Naga Sadow himself before he can re-establish the meditation network or escape to rebuild his forces in the depths of unknown regions. Republic tracking specialists work frantically to analyze the energy signatures detected during the network collapse, searching for patterns that might reveal the location of the command vessel that has served as the focal point for Sith coordination throughout the conflict. The hunt for Sadow requires Republic forces to venture deeper into unexplored space than any previous military operation in galactic history, following hyperspace trails that lead through regions where stars shine different colors and gravitational fields follow patterns that challenge conventional understanding of physics. The pursuit fleet assembled for this mission represents the finest ships and most experienced crews in the Republic Navy, volunteers who understand they may never return from the depths of space they are about to explore. Jedi Master Mehmet Nadil commands the pursuit operation from the flagship Destiny Ascendant, her Force sensitivity providing the only reliable means of tracking an enemy whose movements through hyperspace follow routes that exist partially outside normal space-time dimensions. The meditation techniques she employs during the chase push her abilities to their limits, requiring her to maintain awareness of cosmic currents that flow through regions where the Force itself operates under different principles. The hyperspace routes that Sadow's fleet follows during their retreat reveal the true extent of Sith exploration in the unknown regions, pathways that connect star systems separated by impossible distances through dimensional shortcuts that no Republic navigator has ever imagined. The pursuit fleet must adapt their navigation procedures constantly as they encounter spatial anomalies that make conventional hyperspace travel dangerous or impossible. The first major engagement of the pursuit occurs in the Car Delba system, where Sadow's rearguard forces have prepared defensive positions among asteroid fields that have been artificially modified to enhance their strategic value. The battle demonstrates the desperation of Sith forces who know they are fighting not just for tactical advantage, but for the survival of their entire civilization, their resistance fierce enough to delay the pursuit for precious hours, while their master continues his flight toward safety. The asteroid fortifications that Republic forces encounter in Car Delba represent engineering achievements that blur the distinction between technology and artistry. Massive installations carved from solid rock and enhanced with crystalline matrices that channel dark side energy into defensive systems of unprecedented sophistication. The structures respond to their operators' emotions and intentions, becoming more effective as the defenders' desperation and determination intensify. Jedi Knight Gav Daragon leads boarding parties against the asteroid installations, his lightsaber techniques adapted for combat in environments where conventional physics operate under modified principles. The fighting that occurs within the installations challenges every aspect of his training. Corridors that seem to shift and change in response to the defender's will, weapons that fire energy drawn directly from their user's life force, traps that target the mind and spirit as well as the physical body. The breakthrough that allows Republic forces to overcome the Car Delba defenses comes when Master Nadil realizes that the installation's greatest strength is also their primary weakness, the integration of consciousness and technology that makes them so effective, also creating vulnerabilities that can be exploited by opponents who understand the philosophical principles underlying their operation. Light side techniques that emphasize harmony and balance prove capable of disrupting systems designed around conflict and individual will. The intelligence gathered from captured Sith personnel reveals that Sadow's retreat is not a simple flight to safety, but part of a larger strategy that involves regrouping with reserve forces positioned throughout the unknown regions. The pursuit fleet finds itself racing not just to capture a fleeing enemy, but to prevent the reconstitution of Sith military power that could threaten the Republic for generations to come. The hyperspace chase that follows the Car Delba engagement tests the endurance and capabilities of both pursuit and pursued, fleets moving through regions of space where the normal rules of navigation break down and ships must rely on force sensitivity rather than conventional instruments to maintain their course. The pursuit becomes a test of will as much as technology, crews pushing their vessels beyond designed limitations while following an enemy whose desperation makes them capable of increasingly dangerous maneuvers. The trail leads through systems that appear on no Republic star charts, worlds where ancient civilizations have left ruins that predate galactic history, space stations and installations that seem to have been abandoned for millions of years. The pursuit fleet encounters evidence of conflicts and achievements that dwarf the current war in scope and sophistication, reminders that the galaxy has witnessed struggles for power and understanding that make the current conflict seem small by comparison. The second major engagement occurs in the Primus Golud system, where Sadow's command vessel finally turns to face its pursuers in a desperate attempt to buy time for the evacuation of key personnel and irreplaceable archives. The battle that follows demonstrates the full capabilities of Sith military engineering, a single massive vessel holding its own against an entire Republic task force through weapons and defensive systems that operate on principles that challenge conventional understanding of warfare. Sadow's flagship reveals itself to be more than a simple warship, but a mobile temple and research facility that combines the functions of command center, manufacturing plant, and consciousness amplification device in proportions that boggle Republic engineers. The vessel's weapons draw power directly from the dark side energies that flow through hyperspace, creating effects that transcend simple energy projection to encompass direct manipulation of matter and space itself. The engagement in Primus Golud becomes a battle between competing philosophies as much as opposing fleets. Republic coordination based on voluntary cooperation and shared purpose, confronting Sith unity achieved through hierarchical command structures and the projection of individual will across multiple vessels. The tactical maneuvers that both sides employ reflect their fundamental assumptions about the nature of power and the proper relationship between leaders and followers. Master Nadil's flagship exchanges fire with Sadow's command vessel in a duel that tests the limits of both ships' capabilities, energy weapons creating patterns of destruction that illuminate the space between them with colors that exist nowhere in normal spectra. The battle becomes a contest of endurance as much as firepower, crews on both sides pushing their equipment and themselves beyond sustainable limits in pursuit of decisive advantage. The turning point comes when Republic boarding parties succeed in penetrating the outer sections of Sadow's vessel, Jedi strike teams fighting their way through corridors that seem designed more for ritual and ceremony than practical military use. The interior of the ship reveals the true extent of Sith architectural achievement, spaces that expand beyond their apparent dimensions through applications of force techniques that make geometry subordinate to will and intention. The final confrontation between Republic and Sith forces occurs in the ship's central command chamber, where the remnants of the crystalline meditation network still pulse with residual dark side energy. The battle that takes place in this sanctified space becomes a struggle for the very soul of Sith civilization. Republic forces seeking to capture or destroy the knowledge and artifacts that represent centuries of accumulated wisdom, while Sith defenders fight to preserve the legacy of their entire culture. As the battle reaches its climax, emergency systems throughout Sadow's vessel begin activating, automated sequences that suggest the ship has been prepared for deliberate destruction rather than capture. The realization that their quarry intends to deny them victory through self-sacrifice forces Republic commanders to choose between achieving their objectives and preserving the lives of their own personnel, decisions that must be made in moments while combat rages around them. The final phase of the hunt becomes a race against time, as Republic forces attempt to extract vital intelligence and key personnel, while Sith systems prepare to transform the massive vessel into a stellar-scale weapon that will eliminate both victor and vanquished in a display of cosmic destruction. The evacuation procedures that both sides implement reflect their fundamental philosophies. Republic efforts focused on preserving life, while Sith priorities emphasize the preservation of knowledge and the denial of strategic advantage to enemies. In the end, Naga Sadow himself proves to be the most elusive quarry of all, his consciousness having transcended the limitations of physical form through techniques that allow him to exist simultaneously in multiple dimensions. The Republic forces who finally breach his personal chambers find themselves confronting not a desperate enemy, but a being who has achieved a state of existence that makes conventional capture meaningless, his essence preserved in crystalline matrices that can be transported through hyperspace using methods that no Republic technology can detect or intercept. The hunt for Sadow concludes not with decisive victory, but with the recognition that some forms of power cannot be captured or destroyed through conventional means, only transformed and redirected toward purposes that serve the greater good of all consciousness throughout the galaxy. The climactic engagement of the Great Hyperspace War begins not with a clash of opposing fleets, but with a moment of cosmic stillness that settles over the Primus Golud system, like the held breath of the galaxy itself. In that profound quiet, both Republic and Sith forces pause to contemplate the magnitude of what they are about to unleash, understanding that the battle they are preparing to fight will determine not just the outcome of their current conflict, but the future evolution of consciousness throughout the known universe. Naga Sadow's flagship hangs motionless in space, its massive hull scarred by weeks of running battles, but still radiating the dark majesty that has made it a symbol of Sith power throughout the war. The vessel's crystalline arrays pulse with energies that seem to draw power from the very fabric of hyperspace, creating visual effects that challenge the ability of Republic sensors to record accurately patterns of light and shadow that exist partially outside normal dimensional boundaries. The Republic task force surrounds the Sith command vessel in formations that reflect months of tactical development and adaptation. Their positions chosen not just for strategic advantage, but for symbolic significance, creating geometric patterns in space that assert the principles of order and harmony that guide their civilization. Each ship in the formation carries crews who have been transformed by their experiences in this war, beings who have learned to see beyond the traditional boundaries of their training, to embrace capabilities they never knew they possessed. Master Mehmet Nadil stands in the command center of the Destiny Ascendant, her consciousness expanded through force techniques that allow her to perceive the battle on multiple levels simultaneously, seeing not just the disposition of physical forces, but the flow of energies and intentions that will determine the engagement's ultimate outcome. Her awareness encompasses both the individual lives that hang in the balance and the cosmic significance of decisions that will echo through galactic history for millennia to come. The opening moves of the final battle unfold with the careful precision of a ritual dance, both sides demonstrating their understanding that this engagement transcends simple military objectives to encompass questions about the fundamental nature of power and consciousness. The weapon's fire that begins to fill the space between opposing forces creates patterns of destruction that possess their own terrible beauty, energy discharges that paint the void in colors that exist nowhere in normal spectra. Sadow's response to the Republic assault reveals capabilities that have been held in reserve throughout the war, his flagship transforming from a fleeing vessel into a nexus of dark side power that draws energy from dimensions that most beings cannot perceive. The ship's weapons systems activate in sequence, each discharge preceded by ritual preparations that channel the accumulated will of centuries of Sith development into focused expressions of reality manipulation that transcend conventional understanding of warfare. The space battle that erupts around the massive command vessel tests the limits of both technologies and philosophies. Republic coordination, based on voluntary cooperation, confronting Sith unity, achieved through the projection of individual will across multiple consciousness matrices. The tactical maneuvers that both sides execute reflect their fundamental assumptions about the nature of existence and the proper relationship between individual desire and collective purpose. The boarding actions that punctuate the space engagement become individual dramas of heroism and sacrifice. Small groups of beings fighting desperate battles in corridors and chambers that represent the accumulated architectural wisdom of entire civilizations. Jedi Knights find themselves confronting opponents whose fighting techniques incorporate elements of dance and poetry. Warriors who view combat as a form of artistic expression that reveals the deepest truths about the nature of consciousness and will. Jedi Master Odin leads the most critical boarding party, his ancient wisdom and unparalleled force sensitivity making him uniquely qualified to navigate the ship's interior spaces where reality operates under principles that would confuse younger practitioners. His destination is the central meditation chamber, where the remnants of Sadow's consciousness projection network still pulse with residual energy, systems that must be permanently disabled to prevent their reconstitution in future conflicts. The journey through Sadow's flagship reveals the true extent of Sith architectural achievement, corridors that expand and contract in response to their occupants' emotions, chambers that exist in multiple dimensions simultaneously, artwork that incorporates living beings as essential components in compositions that span centuries. The ship itself represents a masterpiece of integration between technology and consciousness, a vessel that serves simultaneously as transportation, temple, and research facility. The final confrontation between Odin and the defensive systems protecting Sadow's meditation chamber becomes a battle between competing visions of what the Force can become when freed from conventional limitations. The ancient Jedi Master's techniques emphasize harmony and balance, seeking to understand and redirect the dark side energies rather than simply overwhelming them through superior power, an approach that requires patience and wisdom that younger practitioners could never achieve. The meditation chamber that Odin finally reaches represents the culmination of everything the Sith Empire has learned about consciousness manipulation and reality alteration. Crystalline arrays that have been growing for centuries, creating networks of impossible complexity and sophistication. The chamber itself exists partially outside normal space-time, its dimensions shifting in response to the cosmic forces that flow through it, making conventional navigation meaningless for beings who lack proper training in multidimensional awareness. The confrontation with Naga Sadow himself occurs not in physical space, but in the realm of pure consciousness, where the Dark Lord has chosen to make his final stand, his individual identity having transcended the limitations of biological form through techniques that blur the distinction between life and death. The battle that follows tests not just the combat abilities of both participants, but their fundamental understanding of what consciousness can become when pushed beyond conventional boundaries. The duel between light and dark side masters unfolds across multiple dimensions simultaneously, each technique employed by one combatant requiring responses that draw upon philosophical understanding as much as tactical skill. The engagement becomes a dialogue conducted through the medium of pure force energy, arguments about the nature of existence expressed through applications of power that would be impossible for beings who remain trapped within single-dimensional thinking. As the duel reaches its climax, the crystalline networks throughout the ship begin to resonate with frequencies that approach the harmonic signatures of hyperspace itself, creating conditions where the vessel threatens to tear apart the fabric of local spacetime through the sheer intensity of the energies being channeled through its systems. The realization that continued combat risks not just the destruction of both combatants, but the stability of the entire star system forces both sides to consider alternatives to simple victory through superior force. The resolution of the final battle comes not through the defeat of one side by the other, but through a moment of mutual recognition that transcends the ideological differences that have driven the conflict, both masters understanding that their struggle represents not opposition but complementary aspects of a larger truth about consciousness and power. The synthesis that emerges from their confrontation suggests possibilities for galactic civilization that neither the Republic nor the Sith Empire could achieve alone. The aftermath of the final battle reveals the true cost of the Great Hyperspace War. Massive fleets reduced to debris fields that will drift through space for millennia. Millions of beings whose lives have been forever changed by exposure to forces that challenge conventional understanding of reality itself. Yet within the destruction lie seeds of transformation that suggest the conflict's ultimate purpose may have been evolutionary rather than simply destructive. Naga Sadow's final act, before his apparent dissolution into pure force energy, is the transmission of knowledge that encompasses everything the Sith Empire has learned about consciousness expansion and reality manipulation, wisdom that he bequeaths not just to his own followers, but to the galaxy as a whole. The gift represents both surrender and victory. The acknowledgement that true power lies not in defeating one's enemies, but in transforming them into allies through the sharing of deeper understanding. The Republic forces that survive the final battle find themselves in possession of technologies and techniques that will revolutionize their understanding of what galactic civilization can become, but the knowledge comes with responsibilities that will test their wisdom for generations to come. The integration of Sith innovations with Republic principles creates possibilities that neither side could have imagined alone, suggesting that the war's ultimate purpose may have been to force both civilizations beyond their self-imposed limitations. The star charts and navigation data recovered from Sadow's flagship reveal hyperspace routes that connect previously unknown regions of the galaxy, pathways that will allow exploration and colonization on scales that will transform the very concept of galactic civilization. The maps represent not just strategic intelligence, but invitations to adventure and discovery that will occupy explorers for centuries to come. As the final battle draws to its close, survivors on both sides pause to contemplate the magnitude of what they have experienced and the greater mysteries that remain to be explored, finding in their shared ordeal a foundation for understanding that transcends the ideological differences that brought them into conflict. The silence that settles over the battlefield carries within it the promise of peace and the potential for transformation that makes even the war's terrible cost seem worthwhile. The legacy of the final battle extends far beyond its immediate participants to encompass every being in the galaxy. The ripples of change that flow from the confrontation between Republic and Sith forces, creating opportunities for growth and evolution that will affect galactic development for millennia to come. In the end, both sides discover that their greatest victory lies not in defeating their enemies, but in transcending the limitations that made such enemies necessary in the first place. In the weeks following the final battle at Primus Golod, The galaxy awakens to silence more profound than any it has known in living memory. The hyperspace routes that once carried the thunderous passage of warfleets now echo only with the gentle hum of civilian traffic, traders and explorers tentatively venturing along pathways that had been forbidden zones during the months of conflict. The absence of the dark side energies that had saturated these regions during Sadow's war meditation creates a sense of lightness that sensitive beings throughout the galaxy notice without fully understanding its source. The Republic fleet that returns to Coruscant bears scars that tell the story of transformation as much as victory, their hulls marked not just by weapons fire, but by exposure to cosmic forces that have fundamentally altered the molecular structure of their construction materials. The crews who emerge from these vessels carry themselves with the quiet dignity of beings who have witnessed events that transcend normal categories of experience, their eyes holding depths of understanding that speak to encounters with realities that most citizens of the Republic will never comprehend. Master Odin Ur's return to the Jedi Temple creates ripples of change that flow through every level of the Order's hierarchy, his ancient wisdom now enhanced by direct experience with aspects of the Force that theoretical study could never fully convey. The techniques he learned during his confrontation with Naga Sadow's consciousness projection have expanded his understanding of what individual awareness can become when freed from conventional limitations, knowledge that will influence Jedi training methods for generations to come. The debriefing sessions that follow the war's conclusion reveal the true scope of what both sides accomplished and lost during their cosmic struggle, testimonies that paint a picture of conflict that transcended simple military objectives to encompass fundamental questions about the nature of consciousness and power. The official reports that emerge from these sessions will be studied by historians and philosophers for centuries, documents that capture not just tactical details, but insights into the deepest mysteries of existence itself. The casualty reports from both sides tell stories of sacrifice that go beyond simple loss of life to encompass the transformation of entire communities and cultures, populations that were forever changed by exposure to forces that challenged their understanding of reality itself. The numbers themselves seem inadequate to convey the magnitude of what occurred, statistical summaries that cannot capture the individual heroism and tragedy that characterized every engagement of the prolonged conflict. The Republic worlds that suffered under Sith occupation begin the slow process of reconstruction, but the work involves more than simply repairing physical damage or restoring governmental institutions. The populations of these worlds have been exposed to alternative approaches to organization and governance that in many cases proved superior to previous Republic administration, creating complex feelings about liberation that official histories will struggle to address honestly. The technological innovations recovered from captured Sith installations begin to revolutionize Republic industrial capabilities, but the integration of these advances requires careful study of the philosophical principles that made them possible. The fusion of organic and crystalline components that characterizes Sith engineering cannot be simply copied but must be understood at fundamental levels that challenge conventional assumptions about the relationship between consciousness and matter. The hyperspace routes that connected the Sith Empire to Republic space remain navigable, but their passage now requires techniques that most Republic navigators have never encountered. Pathways that demand force sensitivity as much as technical skill to traverse safely. The opening of these routes transforms galactic geography in ways that will influence trade patterns and cultural exchange for millennia, creating opportunities for exploration and discovery that were unimaginable before the war began. The Jedi Order faces the challenge of integrating knowledge gained from contact with Sith philosophy and techniques, wisdom that expands understanding of the Force's potential while raising questions about traditional approaches to training and discipline. The council chambers echo with debates about how to incorporate insights from the dark side without compromising the principles that have guided the Order since its founding, discussions that reveal philosophical divisions that may never be fully resolved. The Republic Senate convenes emergency sessions to address the political implications of a war that revealed the extent to which their civilization had become isolated from broader galactic realities, legislative debates that grapple with questions of identity and purpose that go far beyond normal governmental concerns. The revelation that human beings could achieve the capabilities demonstrated by Sith Lords forces reconsideration of assumptions about species potential and the proper limits of individual development. The economic disruption caused by the war creates both challenges and opportunities as trade networks that were severed during the conflict begin to reconnect through routes that follow new patterns shaped by the availability of previously unknown hyperspace pathways. The commercial possibilities opened by access to unknown regions' resources will drive exploration and colonization efforts that transform the scale and scope of galactic civilization itself. The cultural impact of the war extends far beyond immediate participants to affect artistic and intellectual movements throughout Republic space, creative works that attempt to process experiences that challenge conventional categories of understanding. The literature and music that emerges from this period reflects themes of transformation and transcendence that speak to the war's deeper significance as a catalyst for evolutionary change rather than simple military conflict. The diplomatic initiatives that begin during the war's aftermath focus on establishing contact with Sith populations that remained in the unknown regions, efforts that require unprecedented sensitivity to cultural differences and philosophical approaches to existence that challenge Republic assumptions about the nature of civilization itself. The negotiations that gradually develop represent experiments in interspecies and interphilosophical communication that will establish precedents for galactic diplomacy for centuries to come. The archaeological expeditions that venture into former Sith territories discover evidence of civilizations and achievements that predate known galactic history, ruins and artifacts that suggest the current conflict was merely the latest chapter in cycles of development and transformation that span geological time periods. The discoveries force reconsideration of assumptions about galactic evolution and the role of consciousness in shaping cosmic development. The memorial services held throughout Republic space honor not just those who died in the conflict, but those who were transformed by exposure to realities that transcended their previous understanding of existence, ceremonies that acknowledge forms of sacrifice and achievement that conventional military traditions were not designed to recognize. The monuments that rise from these observances represent attempts to capture in stone and metal experiences that challenge the ability of physical materials to convey their significance. The scientific research programs initiated to study war-related phenomena reveal aspects of physics and consciousness that will influence technological development for generations. Discoveries that blur the traditional boundaries between science and mysticism in ways that make interdisciplinary cooperation essential for continued progress. The research institutes that emerge from this work represent new approaches to knowledge that integrate empirical observation with contemplative practice in unprecedented combinations. The educational reforms implemented in response to war experiences recognize that traditional approaches to learning cannot adequately prepare beings for the realities they may encounter in a galaxy where consciousness and technology have achieved integration that transcends conventional understanding. The curricula that develop from these reforms incorporate meditation and force sensitivity training alongside technical subjects, acknowledging that future citizens will need capabilities that previous generations could never have imagined. The religious and philosophical movements that emerged during the war's aftermath represent attempts to integrate insights gained from contact between light and dark side traditions, spiritual practices that seek to transcend the artificial divisions that have characterized previous approaches to force development. The temples and meditation centers that arise from these movements create spaces where beings can explore aspects of consciousness that traditional institutions were not equipped to address. The long-term consequences of the Great Hyperspace War continue to unfold across decades and centuries, changes that affect every aspect of galactic civilization in ways that the war's immediate participants could never have anticipated. The seeds of transformation planted during the conflict germinate slowly, producing innovations and insights that justify the terrible cost of the struggle, while pointing toward possibilities for development that neither Republic nor Sith Empire could have achieved alone. The historical assessments that emerge from scholarly study of the war's documentation reveal patterns of cause and effect that challenge conventional understanding of how conflicts develop and resolve, academic works that identify the war as a turning point in galactic evolution rather than simply another military campaign. The theories that develop from this research influence political and social development throughout known space, creating frameworks for understanding change that prove applicable to challenges far beyond their original context. As the immediate aftermath of the war gradually gives way to longer-term adaptation and integration, survivors on both sides recognize that they have participated in events whose significance extends far beyond their original understanding. Experiences that transformed not just the outcome of their immediate conflict, but the fundamental nature of what galactic civilization can become when consciousness and technology achieve integration that honors both individual potential and collective responsibility. The Great Hyperspace War ends not with simple victory or defeat, but with recognition that some conflicts serve purposes that transcend the intentions of their participants, catalyzing changes that serve the greater good of consciousness evolution throughout the galaxy, while honoring the sacrifices of those who made such transformation possible through their courage and dedication to principles that proved larger than their individual lives or immediate loyalties. Beneath the surface of the galaxy's return to apparent normalcy, currents of change flow through dimensions that most beings cannot perceive, transformations set in motion by the Great Hyperspace War that will influence galactic development in ways that its participants could never have imagined. The conflict that seemed to end with Naga Sadow's transcendence and the Republic's victory has actually initiated cycles of cause and effect that will ripple through space and time for millennia, creating both opportunities and challenges that future generations will struggle to understand and navigate. In the deepest archives of the Jedi Temple, Master Thane continues her research into the war's long-term implications, studying artifacts and documents that reveal the true scope of what occurred during those months of cosmic struggle. Her investigations uncover evidence that the conflict served purposes that transcended the conscious intentions of either side, fulfilling patterns of galactic evolution that suggest the involvement of forces that operate on scales beyond individual or even civilizational awareness. The hyperspace routes that were opened during the war continue to evolve, their dimensional characteristics slowly shifting as the dark side energies that once saturated them are gradually replaced by more neutral force currents. However, the transformation is not uniform, creating pockets of altered space-time, where the normal rules of physics operate under modified parameters, regions that will challenge explorers and traders for generations to come, while offering opportunities for discovery that could revolutionize understanding of the universe itself. Secret Sith enclaves that survived the war's conclusion begin to emerge from hiding places throughout the unknown regions, small communities of beings who preserved aspects of Sith knowledge and culture during the conflict's chaotic final phases. These survivors represent not the militant expansionism that characterized Sadow's empire, but contemplative traditions that emphasize personal development and philosophical exploration, approaches to the dark side that challenge Republic assumptions about the inevitability of corruption among those who explore forbidden aspects of the Force. The integration of captured Sith technology into Republic systems creates unexpected resonances and interactions, innovations that produce capabilities that neither civilization anticipated when they developed their original approaches to consciousness and matter manipulation. The hybrid technologies that emerge from this synthesis demonstrate potential for achievements that transcend the limitations of either parent tradition, suggesting possibilities for galactic civilization that require unprecedented cooperation between formerly opposed philosophical approaches. Archaeological expeditions venturing into former Sith territories discover installation sites and artifact caches that suggest the war was merely the latest chapter in cycles of conflict and synthesis that have characterized galactic development for millions of years. The ruins they uncover tell stories of civilizations that achieved integration between technology and consciousness, only to face challenges that tested their wisdom and forced evolution toward forms of existence that conventional understanding cannot easily categorize. The Force-sensitive individuals who were exposed to intense dark side energies during the war begin manifesting abilities that combine light and dark side techniques in unprecedented ways, their development following patterns that existing training methods were not designed to address. The Jedi Order faces the challenge of providing guidance for these individuals while avoiding the rigidity that might force them toward extremes that serve neither their individual development nor the greater good of galactic society. Medical research into war-related conditions reveals physiological changes in beings who were exposed to high-level force phenomena, alterations that affect not just their connection to cosmic energies, but their basic biological processes. The discoveries force reconsideration of assumptions about the relationship between consciousness and matter, revealing that exposure to transcendent experiences can produce permanent modifications that influence every aspect of an individual's existence. The political ramifications of the war extend far beyond immediate territorial or military considerations to encompass fundamental questions about the nature of galactic governance and the proper relationship between individual development and collective responsibility. The effectiveness of Sith administrative methods on occupied worlds forces Republic officials to examine their own governmental approaches, leading to reforms that incorporate insights gained from exposure to alternative organizational philosophies. Communication networks established during the war continue to operate through channels that utilize force connections rather than conventional technology, creating information exchange capabilities that transcend normal limitations of space and time. The networks demonstrate potential for forms of civilization that could coordinate activities across galactic distances while maintaining the diversity and independence that characterize healthy cultural development. The artistic and cultural movements that emerge from war experiences produce works that attempt to convey insights and understandings that conventional forms of expression cannot adequately communicate, creative explorations that push the boundaries of what art can achieve when consciousness itself becomes both medium and message. The aesthetic innovations that result from these experiments influence cultural development throughout Republic space, creating new forms of beauty and meaning that reflect expanded awareness of existence's possibilities. Scientific research programs investigating war-related phenomena discover principles of energy and matter manipulation that will drive technological development for centuries, innovations that blur traditional boundaries between mysticism and empirical investigation. The research methodologies that prove necessary for studying these phenomena require integration of contemplative practices with experimental techniques, creating new approaches to knowledge that honor both subjective experience and objective measurement. The educational institutions that develop curricula addressing war-related insights face the challenge of preparing students for realities that transcend conventional categories of learning. Academic programs that must integrate practical skills with philosophical understanding while maintaining the intellectual rigor that characterizes genuine scholarship. The pedagogical innovations that emerge from these efforts influence approaches to learning throughout the galaxy, creating educational methods that honor both individual development and collective wisdom. The religious and spiritual movements that attempt to synthesize light and dark side insights create communities where beings can explore aspects of consciousness that traditional institutions were not equipped to address, experimental approaches to spiritual development that may produce breakthroughs in understanding the fundamental nature of existence. The practices that develop within these communities represent evolutionary steps in galactic consciousness that could influence species development for millennia to come. The long-term psychological effects of war exposure begin manifesting in ways that conventional mental health approaches cannot adequately address, conditions that require therapeutic methods that acknowledge the reality of transcendent experiences while providing practical support for individuals struggling to integrate extraordinary insights into daily existence. The healing modalities that develop from this work contribute to understanding of consciousness that benefits not just war survivors but all beings seeking to realize their full potential. The economic networks that emerge from post-war reconstruction follow patterns that reflect lessons learned about the integration of competition and cooperation, creating commercial relationships that honor both individual excellence and collective prosperity. The business models that prove most successful in this environment demonstrate approaches to economic activity that could serve as foundations for galactic prosperity that transcends the boom and bust cycles that have characterized previous eras. The diplomatic protocols developed for communicating with surviving Sith communities require unprecedented sensitivity to cultural and philosophical differences, negotiation methods that acknowledge the validity of alternative approaches to existence while seeking common ground for peaceful coexistence. The techniques that prove effective in these communications contribute to understanding of interspecies and interphilosophical dialogue that will influence galactic relations for generations. The technological artifacts that continue to be discovered in former war zones demonstrate capabilities that challenge conventional understanding of what consciousness and technology can achieve when properly integrated. Devices that respond to operator intentions and emotions in ways that make traditional distinctions between tool and extension of self meaningless. The study of these artifacts contributes to development of technologies that could revolutionize every aspect of galactic civilization if their principles can be safely adapted to Republic applications. The environmental effects of intense force phenomena become apparent in star systems where major battles occurred, regions where the fabric of space-time itself bears permanent modifications that influence everything from stellar evolution to planetary development. These cosmic-scale consequences of the war serve as reminders that actions taken during transcendent conflicts can have implications that extend far beyond their immediate participants to affect the physical structure of reality itself. The generational effects of war exposure begin manifesting in the children of survivors, individuals who inherit not just genetic modifications, but direct access to expanded consciousness capabilities that their parents acquired through traumatic experience. These young beings represent evolutionary developments that could transform the nature of galactic civilization if their gifts are properly understood and nurtured rather than feared or suppressed. As decades pass, and the war's immediate impact gives way to longer-term consequences, it becomes clear that the Great Hyperspace War served as a catalyst for transformations that will influence galactic development for geological time periods, changes that honor the sacrifices of those who participated while pointing toward possibilities for consciousness evolution that justify even the conflict's terrible cost. The hidden consequences that continue to unfold represent the war's true legacy, seeds of transformation that will produce flowers of understanding and capability that neither Republic nor Sith Empire could have cultivated alone. 5,000 years after the Great Hyperspace War, in the archives of the Jedi Temple on Coruscant, Master Kira Thane sets down the final holocron containing the preserved memories of that ancient conflict, her research complete, but her understanding forever changed by exposure to events that shaped the galaxy's destiny in ways that their participants could never have imagined. The patterns she has uncovered reveal connections that span millennia, threads of cause and effect that link the earliest conflicts between light and dark to struggles that continue to influence galactic civilization in her own era. The hyperspace routes that Naga Sadow's fleets carved through dimensions beyond normal space continue to carry travelers between worlds that would otherwise remain isolated, pathways that have become essential arteries of galactic commerce and cultural exchange despite their origins in warfare and conquest. The dark side energies that once saturated these passages have long since dissipated, replaced by neutral currents that make them safe for conventional navigation while retaining subtle characteristics that enhance the force sensitivity of those who travel them regularly. The technological innovations that emerged from the integration of Republic and Sith knowledge systems continue to influence galactic development, their principles incorporated into devices and systems that their original creators would find miraculous yet entirely consistent with the philosophical foundations they established through their cosmic struggle. The fusion of organic and crystalline components that characterize Sith engineering has become standard practice in applications ranging from starship construction to medical treatment, achievements that demonstrate the creative potential of synthesis between opposing approaches to consciousness and matter. The Jedi Order that exists in Master Thane's time bears the subtle but unmistakable influence of wisdom gained through contact with Sith philosophy, training methods that acknowledge the full spectrum of Force potential, while maintaining commitment to principles of service and compassion that prevent the corruption that claimed the original Dark Jedi exiles. The techniques that Master Odin developed for countering dark side applications have evolved into approaches to Force mastery that honor both light and shadow as essential aspects of cosmic balance. The political structures that govern the Republic have incorporated insights gained from observation of Sith administrative methods, creating governmental systems that balance individual excellence with collective responsibility in ways that neither civilization could have achieved alone. The effectiveness of these hybrid approaches to governance has contributed to periods of stability and prosperity that surpass anything known in earlier galactic history, achievements that justify the terrible cost of the war that made such synthesis possible. The archaeological discoveries that continue to emerge from former Sith territories reveal evidence of the cyclical nature of galactic evolution, patterns of development and transformation that suggest the Great Hyperspace War was merely the most recent iteration of struggles that have shaped consciousness development since the galaxy first became capable of supporting intelligent life. The ruins and artifacts that explorers uncover tell stories of civilizations that achieved integration between individual will and cosmic harmony, only to face new challenges that demanded further evolution. The Force-sensitive bloodlines that trace their ancestry to war survivors demonstrate capabilities that combine elements from both light and dark traditions, individuals whose natural abilities reflect the synthesis that their ancestors achieved through exposure to transcendent conflict. These beings represent evolutionary developments that point toward possibilities for consciousness expansion that could transform the nature of galactic civilization if their gifts are properly understood and cultivated. The scientific understanding of Force phenomena that has developed through study of war-related effects provides insights into the fundamental nature of reality that influence every field of knowledge. Discoveries that reveal the artificial nature of traditional distinctions between physics and metaphysics, between individual consciousness and cosmic awareness. The research methodologies that prove necessary for investigating these phenomena require integration of contemplative practice with empirical observation, approaches to knowledge that honor both subjective experience and objective measurement. The cultural movements that emerged from war experiences continue to influence artistic and intellectual development throughout the galaxy, creative traditions that attempt to convey insights and understandings that conventional forms of expression cannot adequately communicate. The aesthetic innovations that resulted from attempts to process transcendent experiences have produced new forms of beauty and meaning that reflect expanded awareness of existence possibilities, achievements that enrich galactic civilization in ways that purely practical applications of war-related knowledge could never accomplish. The religious and spiritual communities that developed around synthesis of light and dark side insights have become sources of wisdom and guidance for beings seeking to understand their place in cosmic evolution, contemplative traditions that offer practical methods for consciousness development that honor both individual potential and collective responsibility. The practices that emerged from these communities represent evolutionary steps in galactic spirituality that influence species development on scales that transcend individual lifetimes. The diplomatic protocols that were developed for communication between formerly opposed civilizations have become models for interspecies and interphilosophical dialogue throughout the galaxy. Techniques that acknowledge the validity of alternative approaches to existence while seeking common ground for peaceful coexistence. The success of these methods in resolving conflicts that might otherwise have led to warfare demonstrates the practical value of wisdom gained through exposure to transcendent struggle. The economic systems that evolved from post-war reconstruction continue to provide frameworks for prosperity that balance competition with cooperation, commercial relationships that honor both individual excellence and collective well-being. The business models that proved most effective in post-war environments have become foundations for galactic economic activity that transcends the boom and bust cycles that characterized earlier eras, creating stability that supports both innovation and security. The educational institutions that developed curricula addressing war-related insights continue to prepare students for realities that transcend conventional categories of learning. Academic programs that integrate practical skills with philosophical understanding while maintaining intellectual rigor that characterizes genuine scholarship. The pedagogical innovations that emerged from these efforts influence approaches to learning throughout the galaxy, creating educational methods that honor both individual development and collective wisdom. The medical and therapeutic approaches that were developed for treating war-related conditions have revolutionized understanding of the relationship between consciousness and physical health. Healing modalities that address not just symptoms, but the fundamental patterns of energy and awareness that determine well-being. The techniques that proved effective for helping war survivors integrate transcendent experiences into daily life have become standard practices that benefit all beings seeking to realize their full potential. The environmental modifications that resulted from intense force phenomena continue to influence planetary and stellar development in regions where major battles occurred. Cosmic scale effects that serve as reminders of the reality of consciousness as a force capable of altering the physical structure of the universe itself. These modifications have become laboratories for studying the interaction between awareness and matter, research that contributes to understanding of cosmic evolution that extends far beyond immediate practical applications. The generational effects of war exposure continue to manifest in the descendants of survivors, individuals who inherit not just genetic modifications but direct access to expanded consciousness capabilities that were acquired through their ancestors' exposure to transcendent conflict. These beings represent evolutionary developments that could transform the nature of galactic civilization if their gifts are properly understood and nurtured, rather than feared or suppressed. Master Thane closes her research with the recognition that the Great Hyperspace War serves as a perfect example of how conflicts that appear destructive on the surface can serve evolutionary purposes that transcend the understanding of their immediate participants, catalyzing changes that benefit galactic civilization in ways that justify even terrible costs in lives and suffering. The patterns she has identified suggest that consciousness evolution requires periodic challenges that force beings beyond their comfortable limitations, struggles that produce growth that could not be achieved through peaceful development alone. The connections between the ancient war and current galactic conditions reveal the ongoing nature of the transformation that began 5 millennia ago, changes that continue to unfold as beings throughout the galaxy encounter situations that require them to transcend traditional boundaries between light and dark, individual and collective, practical and transcendent. The legacy of Naga Sado and Master Rodan lives on in every Force user who learns to honor both power and compassion, every government that balances individual rights with collective responsibility, every being who discovers that true strength comes from integration rather than domination. The echoes of the great hyperspace war that continue to reverberate through galactic civilization serve as reminders that the most significant conflicts are not those that determine immediate winners and losers, but those that catalyze evolutionary changes that benefit all participants regardless of their original allegiances. The wisdom that emerges from such struggles becomes part of the permanent heritage of galactic consciousness, insights that guide development toward ever greater integration of individual potential with cosmic purpose. As Master Thane contemplates the vast sweep of galactic history that her research has revealed, she understands that the Great Hyperspace War represents not an anomaly in galactic development, but a perfect example of how consciousness evolves through exposure to challenges that demand transcendence of previous limitations, conflicts that serve the greater good, even when their immediate effects seem purely destructive. The patterns she has uncovered suggest that such evolutionary crises will continue to occur as galactic civilization encounters new frontiers that require further expansion of awareness and capability. As the first light of Coruscant's artificial dawn filters through the crystalline windows of the Jedi Temple's highest archive chamber, Master Kira Thane sits in contemplative silence, surrounded by the accumulated wisdom of 5,000 years of galactic history. The holocrons and data crystals that contain the preserved memories of the Great Hyperspace War pulsed gently with stored energies, their soft illumination creating patterns of light and shadow that seem to dance with the rhythm of cosmic forces that flow through the temple's ancient foundations. The weight of knowledge that she has absorbed during her years of research settles around her consciousness like a mantle woven from starlight and time. Understanding that encompasses not just the tactical details of ancient battles, but the deeper patterns of cause and effect that connect every moment of galactic history to every other in an intricate web of meaning and purpose. The responsibility of possessing such knowledge feels both humbling and empowering, awareness that comes with obligations that extend far beyond academic curiosity or historical scholarship. The personal cost of her immersion in the memories of beings who lived through transcendent conflict becomes apparent in the way that ordinary experiences now carry resonances of cosmic significance, simple conversations with fellow Jedi, echoing with harmonics that reveal connections to philosophical struggles that span millennia. The boundary between past and present has become permeable for her, each moment of current experience illuminated by understanding of how it fits into patterns that began long before her birth and will continue long after her death. The moral complexity of the ancient war weighs heavily on her consciousness. The recognition that beings who committed terrible acts in service of their convictions were not monsters but individuals struggling to understand their place in cosmic evolution, their choices shaped by circumstances and pressures that would challenge the wisdom of any conscious being. The traditional categories of good and evil seem inadequate to encompass the full reality of what occurred, moral frameworks that must expand to acknowledge the evolutionary necessity of conflicts that serve purposes beyond the understanding of their immediate participants. The parallels between ancient struggles and contemporary challenges create a sense of urgency about sharing the insights gained from her research. Understanding that the lessons of the Great Hyperspace War remain relevant to beings who face their own moments of choice between growth and stagnation, synthesis and separation, transcendence and comfortable limitation. The wisdom preserved in the ancient records offers guidance for navigating challenges that may seem entirely modern but actually represent eternal aspects of consciousness development. The cyclical nature of galactic history that her research has revealed suggests that the conflicts and transformations of the past will be repeated in new forms as consciousness encounters fresh frontiers that demand expansion beyond current capabilities, patterns that make her work not just historical study but practical preparation for challenges that future generations will inevitably face. The knowledge she has gained becomes a form of inheritance that must be transmitted carefully to ensure its proper use by those who will confront their own evolutionary crises. The loneliness of possessing understanding that few others can share creates a poignant sense of isolation even within the community of the Jedi Temple. Awareness that the depths of meaning she has discovered in ancient events cannot be easily communicated to beings who have not made the same journey through preserved memories of transcendent experience. The fellowship of scholars who share similar depths of historical understanding becomes precious beyond ordinary friendship, bonds forged through mutual exposure to truths that transform fundamental assumptions about the nature of existence. The practical implications of her discoveries extend far beyond academic interest to encompass questions about how galactic civilization should prepare for the evolutionary challenges that future development will inevitably produce. Policy considerations that require integration of historical wisdom with contemporary understanding of galactic conditions. The recommendations that emerge from her work carry weight that goes beyond scholarly opinion to encompass guidance that could influence the fate of trillions of beings across thousands of worlds. The spiritual dimensions of her research have transformed her relationship with the Force itself. Meditation practices that now incorporate awareness of the vast sweep of galactic consciousness evolution, personal development that honors both individual growth and participation in cosmic processes that transcend the boundaries of single lifetimes. The techniques she has learned from studying ancient masters represent approaches to Force mastery that synthesize insights from both light and dark traditions while maintaining commitment to principles that serve the greater good of all consciousness. The artistic and creative impulses that her research has awakened express themselves in forms that attempt to convey insights that conventional scholarship cannot adequately communicate, works that bridge the gap between analytical understanding and intuitive comprehension of truths that must be experienced rather than simply studied. The creative expressions that emerge from her deep immersion in historical consciousness represent attempts to make the wisdom of the past accessible to beings who learn through beauty and inspiration rather than academic analysis. The technological applications that could emerge from proper understanding of the principles underlying ancient Sith and Jedi achievements create both excitement and concern. Innovations that could revolutionize galactic civilization while carrying risks that require careful consideration of their potential consequences. The integration of consciousness and technology that characterize the most advanced achievements of both ancient civilizations offers possibilities for development that could transform the nature of existence itself if approached with proper wisdom and caution. The generational responsibility that comes with her knowledge creates awareness that the insights she has gained must be transmitted not just through formal teaching, but through the example of how such understanding can be integrated into daily life in ways that honor both individual development and collective well-being. The mentorship roles that emerge from her research represent opportunities to guide younger beings toward their own discoveries while avoiding the dangers that come from too rapid exposure to truths that require gradual integration. The cosmic perspective that her studies have provided transforms her understanding of personal significance and individual purpose. Awareness that each being's choices and actions contribute to patterns of development that operate on scales that dwarf individual lifetimes while remaining dependent on the quality of individual consciousness for their ultimate success. The recognition of personal participation in cosmic processes creates both humility about individual importance and empowerment about the reality of individual contribution to universal evolution. The therapeutic value of historical understanding becomes apparent in her ability to help other beings process their own experiences of transcendent challenge, guidance that draws upon wisdom gained from studying how others have navigated similar territories of consciousness expansion and integration. The counseling skills that emerge from her research represent practical applications of historical knowledge that serve immediate human needs while honoring the deeper patterns of development that such challenges represent. The prophetic dimensions of historical study reveal themselves in her growing ability to recognize patterns in contemporary events that echo ancient cycles, insight that provides not specific predictions about the future, but general understanding of how current choices and trends are likely to influence long-term development. The guidance that emerges from such pattern recognition offers valuable perspective for beings seeking to make decisions that serve not just immediate needs, but the evolutionary trajectory of galactic consciousness. The integration of her historical research with her roles as Jedi Master and Galactic Citizen creates a synthesis of knowledge and practice that demonstrates how deep understanding of the past can enhance effectiveness in addressing contemporary challenges, wisdom that serves both personal development and collective welfare through applications that honor the full spectrum of insights that historical study can provide. The example of such integration offers models for how other beings can approach their own areas of expertise in ways that serve the greater good. As Master Thane prepares to share the fruits of her research with the broader galactic community, she carries with her the recognition that knowledge alone is insufficient without the wisdom to apply it properly, understanding that must be balanced with compassion, insight that must be tempered with humility, power that must be guided by service to the greater good of all consciousness throughout the galaxy. The weight of history that she bears is not a burden but a gift, responsibility that comes with opportunities to contribute to the ongoing evolution of galactic civilization in ways that honor the sacrifices of those who came before, while pointing toward possibilities for development that justify the struggles through which such wisdom was gained. The legacy of the Great Hyperspace War lives on in every being who learns to transcend the limitations that once seemed permanent, every choice that serves synthesis rather than separation, every moment of consciousness that contributes to the eternal dance of evolution that connects all beings across space and time. As the eternal cycle of day and night continues its ancient rhythm across the galaxy, Master Kira Thane rises from her meditation cushion in the archive chamber, her research into the Great Hyperspace War finally complete. The soft hum of the Jedi Temple's life support systems creates a gentle background melody that seems to harmonize with the distant songs of stars as they wheel through their celestial dance, cosmic music that has been playing since the galaxy first learned to dream of consciousness and connection. She moves with the quiet grace of someone who has learned to carry the weight of vast knowledge lightly, her footsteps soft against the polished stone floors as she makes her way toward the temple's highest observation deck. The corridors she passes through hold the accumulated wisdom of countless generations of Jedi, their walls lined with artifacts and memories that speak to the endless journey of consciousness toward ever greater understanding and compassion. The observation deck opens onto a view of Coruscant that stretches beyond the horizon in every direction, the city planet's endless lights creating patterns of beauty that rival the constellations themselves. In the distance, the traffic streams that carry beings between worlds create rivers of light that flow through the night sky, connections that bind the galaxy together in networks of trade and communication that would have been impossible without the hyperspace routes opened during the ancient war. Standing at the edge of the platform, Master Thane extends her consciousness through the Force, feeling the gentle pulse of life that flows through every level of the vast city below. Millions of beings sleep peacefully in their homes, their dreams carrying them to worlds of possibility and wonder, while others work through the night to maintain the complex systems that keep galactic civilization functioning smoothly. The harmony she senses speaks to the success of the synthesis that began 5,000 years ago, the integration of diverse approaches to existence that has created a civilization capable of embracing both individual excellence and collective compassion. Her awareness expands beyond Coruscant to touch the consciousness of beings throughout the galaxy. For sensitive individuals who carry within themselves the legacy of the great hyperspace war in ways they may never fully understand. On distant worlds, young Jedi practice meditation techniques that incorporate insights gained from the ancient conflict, their training enhanced by wisdom that emerged from the collision between light and dark. In the depths of space, explorers follow hyperspace routes that were carved by Sith fleets in their desperate flight from Republic forces, pathways that now carry messages of peace and cooperation rather than war and conquest. The vision that flows through her meditation encompasses the vast sweep of galactic time, showing her how the patterns set in motion by the ancient war continue to influence development across species and civilizations. She sees worlds where the descendants of Sith survivors have built communities dedicated to contemplative practice and philosophical exploration, their understanding of the dark side having evolved into approaches to consciousness that serve creation rather than destruction. She witnesses the ongoing work of archaeologists who continue to uncover evidence of the cyclical nature of galactic evolution, discoveries that point toward future challenges and opportunities that will test the wisdom of generations yet unborn. The cosmic perspective that her research has provided reveals the great hyperspace war as merely one movement in a vast symphony of consciousness evolution that has been playing out across the galaxy since the first beings learned to question their place in the universe. The conflict between Republic and Sith forces was neither the beginning nor the end of this eternal dance between different approaches to existence, but rather a crucial moment of synthesis that prepared the galaxy for challenges that would require the integration of seemingly opposing principles. As she breathes in the cool night air, Master Thane feels the presence of those who came before, the spirits of Master Ordan and Naga Sado, and countless others who gave their lives to the eternal struggle between growth and stagnation, synthesis and separation. Their sacrifice was not in vain, for their choices created the foundation upon which current galactic civilization has been built, achievements that honor both individual potential and collective responsibility in ways that neither the ancient Republic nor the Sith Empire could have imagined alone. The gentle wind that stirs the air around the observation platform carries with it the scents and sounds of a world at peace, the distant hum of traffic and conversation, the fragrance of gardens that bloom in the spaces between towering buildings, the soft whisper of night birds that have somehow found homes in the urban canyon. These simple pleasures speak to the ultimate victory of the ancient war, the triumph of life and consciousness over the forces that would limit their expression and development. Her meditation deepens as she allows her awareness to flow outward beyond the boundaries of the galaxy itself, touching the vast cosmic currents that connect all existence in patterns of meaning and purpose that transcend individual understanding. The great hyperspace war takes its place in this larger context as one note in an infinite composition, its significance not diminished by the vastness of the cosmic perspective, but rather enhanced by recognition of its role in the eternal evolution of consciousness toward ever greater expressions of beauty, wisdom, and compassion. The stars that shine above Coruscant carry within their light the memory of worlds that were transformed by the ancient conflict, systems where the collision between different approaches to the Force created new possibilities for development that continue to unfold across the centuries. Each photon that reaches her eyes has traveled for years or decades through space that was once filled with the energies of battle, cosmic distances that have transformed the violence of the past into the gentle radiance that illuminates the peaceful present. As the night deepens and the city below settles into the quiet rhythms of rest and renewal, Master Thane completes her meditation with a sense of profound gratitude for the privilege of having touched the memories of those who shaped galactic destiny through their courage and sacrifice. The knowledge she has gained will be shared with future generations, wisdom that will help them navigate their own evolutionary challenges while honoring the legacy of those who made their existence possible. The final moments of her research culminate in a recognition that transcends academic achievement or personal accomplishment, understanding that she has been permitted to participate in the eternal conversation between consciousness and cosmos that gives meaning to existence itself. The Great Hyperspace War continues to echo through the galaxy not as a memory of conflict, but as a reminder of the transformative power of consciousness when it chooses growth over comfort, synthesis over separation, love over fear. She turns from the observation deck and walks slowly back through the temple corridors, her heart filled with peace and her spirit aligned with the cosmic forces that guide the galaxy toward ever greater expressions of wisdom and compassion. The archive chamber awaits her return, ready to preserve the insights she has gained for future generations who will face their own moments of choice in the eternal dance of consciousness evolution. Behind her, the stars continue their ancient dance across the sky, their light carrying the promise of infinite possibilities for growth and understanding that will unfold across the countless years to come. Guided by the wisdom gained through struggle and illuminated by the love that connects all beings in the vast community of galactic consciousness.